Chapter 3362. Blockhead. These three words suited Yin Ku's image. However, the words "get used to it" made President Feng Yin tremble and want to cry. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and asked, "Are you afraid? Then do you still want to continue exploring the Golden Dragon Abyss? If you don't want to take the risk, you can go back." Since they were already at the Golden Dragon Abyss, Feng Yin Guild was of no use to Ji Tianxing. If the people of the Hidden Wind Society returned, he would have one less burden. Of course, Feng Yin Guild had helped him, and he was not someone who would burn the bridge after crossing it. As long as Feng Yin Guild did not take the initiative to leave, he would chase them away. Although President Feng Yin was depressed, he nodded without hesitation when he heard Ji Tianxing's words. Of course, we have to continue exploring. We spent 10 days and lost so many people. It was not easy for us to reach the abyss. How can we give up so easily? Although President Feng Yin said so, he was laughing bitterly in his heart. We have a deep grudge with the four factions. If we do not enter the abyss to gain some benefits, wouldn't I die in vain? Of course, he could only think about it in his heart and did not dare to say it out loud. All right, let's continue. Let's not waste any more time. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and led Chao Qingyu and Yank to the magma sea below. After the previous incident, they no longer devoured the seven-color divine fire and focused on their journey. Since the three of them had refined a large amount of divine fire, the power of their fire elemental laws had increased significantly. Continuing to refine the divine fire would not increase their power by much. President Feng Yin and the other divine lords also composed themselves and followed Ji Tianxing and company to the bottom of the abyss. Soon, the group arrived above the magma sea and stopped in midair to observe their surroundings. They were at the bottom of the abyss, and the space around them suddenly opened up. The abyss above them was a deep well with a diameter of more than 2,000 miles. As for the magma sea below them, it was abnormally wide and boundless, connecting to the depths of the Earth's core. The dark red magma flowed slowly as seven-colored divine fire constantly emerged from the surface of the sea and floated above the magma sea. Looking into the distance, he could vaguely see some black dots scattered on the surface of the sea in all directions. President Feng Yin took the initiative to introduce young Master Ji. Those are some reef islands in the magma sea. They're usually made of very strong divine stones and metals. Precious divine stones and rare metals could be found on almost every reef island. There were even some lucky ones who discovered extremely rare medicinal herbs and rare treasures on those reef islands. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were all god kings. They had more experience and knowledge than President Feng Yin. Of course, they knew that herbs growing on the magma sea and reef islands sounded very mysterious. But in fact, it was true. Those rare herbs were not ordinary herbs, but some special divine items. For example, the five-color jade Ganoderma, leafless rootless fruit, geocentric fire lotus, and so on. Ji Tianxing looked at President Feng Yin and asked, "Then what is your goal in coming to the abyss this time? Which reef island?" President Feng Yin pointed to the southeast and explained, "In that direction, about 500,000 miles away, there's an area with 10 large reef islands. Our goal is one of the Red Rock Islands. More than 20 days ago, there was news from the Golden Dragon Abyss that someone saw a worldly anomaly in that area. A king-level divine item was born." Ji Tianxing said with a faint smile, "Although many factions will choose other reef islands, most of the powerful factions will rush to that area, right?" President Feng Yin nodded and said with a serious expression, "That is indeed the case. Therefore, that place has the highest chance of finding a king-level divine item, but it is also the most dangerous." After hesitating for a moment, he added, "If young Master Ji feels that it is too dangerous for us to go to Red Rock Island, we can go to other." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianxing flew to the southeast and went to Red Rock Island. Yank followed with an expressionless face. Chao Qingyu patted President Feng Yin's shoulder and said with a playful smile, "Old Feng, don't show off your little tricks in front of young master. Young master doesn't hate you yet, so you still have a chance to make a fortune. If you continue to do this, it will only backfire. When young master hates you, it will be too late for you to cry. After saying that, Chao Qingyu also followed Ji Tianxing and flew to Red Rock Island. President Feng Yin was stunned and stared at Ji Tianxing and the other two with a complicated expression. He felt a little lucky. Fortunately, he did not say anything overboard, and Chao Qingyu reminded him in time. Otherwise, it would be too late for regrets if things really came to that point. If it was a normal day, they could cover the distance of 500,000 miles in a few hours. However, flying above the lava sea was full of seven-color divine fire in all directions, so they had to slow down. Some of the seven-color divine fire danced like willow catkins, some like floating clouds, and some formed whirlpools and hurricanes, raging above the sea. In short, the lava sea was extremely dangerous. Even upper-level and peak divine lords would be burned by the seven-color divine fire if they were not careful, or even burned to ashes. 12 hours later, they had flown more than 400,000 miles and were not far from Red Rock Island. In the process of flying, they passed by hundreds of reef islands of different sizes. The big ones had a radius of dozens of miles, as big as a small city. The small ones had a radius of dozens of feet, as big as a house. Most of the reef islands were dark brown, but there were also many reef islands that were colorful due to the large number of special divine stones and metals. Even though those reef islands contained precious paragon stones and metals, and even 2 reef islands had paragon stone veins on them, they were still very valuable. However, Ji Tianxing and the rest continued their journey and did not stop to dig. After all, Ji Tianxing and the rest could use their divine consciousness to check that the divine stones and metals on the reef islands were all monarch-level upper-grade and supreme-grade materials. Although they were valuable, they would not catch the eye of a divine king expert. If they wasted time digging, they would definitely delay the search for a king-level divine object. They were getting closer and closer to Red Rock Island. At this time, the surface of the magma sea, which was still calm, suddenly began to boil. The extremely violent seven-colored divine fire condensed into dozens of flaming light pillars that rushed out of the lava sea and blasted towards the divine lords of the Hidden Wind Society. Faced with the sudden danger, President Feng Yin and many divine lords were already prepared. They hurriedly scattered in all directions to avoid the danger. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yang did not panic. They stood in their original spots calmly and cast spells to block, dissolve, and devour the flaming light pillars. However, the speed of the flaming light pillars was extremely fast. A few divine lords could not avoid it and were hit on the spot. With a bang 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 sound, the few divine lords were killed on the spot. The flaming light pillars also became raging fire waves that swept across 100 miles. Chapter 3363. In the blink of an eye, President Feng Yin and the dozen Sir Gods were engulfed by the seven-colored divine fire. Everyone's divine power shield was instantly shattered by the seven-colored divine fire. The next moment, their divine bodies were about to be burned to ashes by the seven-colored divine fire. With the power of the flaming light pillars and the raging fire waves, most of the Sir Gods would die. It was estimated that only President Feng Yin and a few elders would be able to survive by luck. Seeing such a dangerous situation, the Vice President and the Sir Gods who escaped the sea of fire were anxious but helpless. With their strength, they could not rescue their companions. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing decisively saved them. Swoosh! Swoosh! He raised his palms and used the engulfing divine power to create 2 huge black vortexes that covered a radius of 100 miles. In an instant, the raging fire waves and flaming light pillars were completely engulfed by the vortexes. President Feng Yin and more than 10 Sir Gods had narrowly escaped death. All of them revealed expressions as though they had survived a calamity. They were extremely happy and excited. However, it was too early for them to be happy. A few fiery red figures flew out from the sea of lava below. They extended their huge claws and pounced at them. No one was prepared for the existence of living creatures in the sea of lava. Moreover, the few monsters that were as big as houses and looked like toads moved very quickly and silently. It was impossible to guard against them. Bam! Bam! With two muffled sounds, two Sir Gods, who had yet to recover from their shock, were caught by the two monsters' giant claws while they were unprepared. The fiery red monsters seemed to be formed by lava. They were surrounded by the raging, seven-colored divine fire. After the two Sir Gods were caught, they were immediately charred black. Black smoke rose from their bodies and black ashes drifted. Under the unparalleled pain, the two Sir Gods let out heart-wrenching screams. However, after 2 breaths, their screams stopped abruptly. This was because the two of them were torn to pieces by the monsters. Their divine bodies and divine sparks were burned to ashes. President Feng Yin and the 20 Sir Gods saw this scene with their own eyes and screamed, "Oh my God, it's the fire demon. We are so unlucky to have encountered the terrifying fire demon. Everyone retreat. Retreat to young Master G's side. Don't panic. Be careful of your surroundings. There will definitely be other fire demons waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack." Even though everyone was panicking and terrified. However, President Feng Yin and Vice President tried their best to remain calm and ordered everyone to retreat to the side of Ji Tianxing and Xiao Qingyu. They knew very well that these 3 foreign dignitaries had extraordinary strength and were not afraid of the 7-colored divine fire. As expected, more than 20 godly sovereigns surrounded Ji Tianxing and the other 2. Even if a large amount of rainbow divine fire surged towards them, Xiao Qingyu and Yank easily refined it. When the 4 dark red fire demons saw that everyone was gathered together and it was difficult to attack, they wanted to dive back into the sea of lava and find another opportunity to launch a sneak attack. However, Ji Tianxing would not give them a chance. Heaven capturing Dragon Claw. Ji Tianxing formed a divine art with both of his palms, releasing a boundless amount of divine power. He released 4 gigantic golden palms, grabbing towards the 4 fire demons. Bang, 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 bang. Each of the fire demons had the strength of a high-level divine lord, and they were unable to escape from the dragon claws, even though they tried their best to escape. They were caught before they could dive into the sea of lava. However, their bodies were special. Their bodies were like jelly and plasticine, and they could change shape and expand at will. Even though they were caught by the dragon claws, they tried their best to shrink and elongate their bodies, trying to escape through the gaps between the dragon claws. Ji Tianxing frowned and controlled the 4 dragon claws to seal the power of the fire demons. He squeezed them into a ball and pulled them back to him. Swish! Swish, swish, swish! The 4 fire demons shrank to the size of a water tank and floated in front of Ji Tianxing like a red crystal ball, unable to move anymore. Ji Tianxing, Xiao Qingyu, and Yank sized them up, but President Feng Yin and the other divine lords were frightened and quickly hid far away. Before Ji Tianxing asked, President Feng Yin took the initiative to introduce, "Young Master Ji, you must be careful of those fire demons. They are very cunning. These fire demons are not only powerful and can control the 7-color divine fire, but their bodies also contain deadly poison. Once touched, it will be fatal. There are not many fire demons, and they all hide in the vast sea of lava, so you will not encounter them often. However, once they appear, they will often cause great damage to the major factions and easily kill many Divine Lord experts." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not say anything. He continued to observe the bodies of the fire demons. Yank had a look of disdain and did not take President Feng Yin's words to heart. He even reached out his left hand and grabbed a fire demon in his palm, kneading and crushing it without restraint. "Do you think these little things can threaten me? I think they are suitable as crystal balls. I will play with them when I am free. They feel pretty good." As he spoke, he grabbed another fire demon and kept kneading the 2 crystal balls in his palm. The 7-color divine fire and the deadly poison did not exist to him. Seeing this scene, President Feng Yin and the 20-odd divine lords widened their eyes in shock as they exclaimed, "Heavens! Isn't he too powerful?" Those are fire demons that strike fear into the hearts of countless divine lords. He actually treats them like toys and plays with them in his palm. Oh my, those fire demons probably did not expect that they would end up in such a humiliating state, right? In the past, we could not afford to offend the elusive fire demons. Now, the fire demons have encountered someone they cannot afford to offend. Just as everyone was discussing, Ji Tianxing finished observing and threw the third fire demon to Yank. These fire demons are quite interesting. I'll give them all to you. Take your time. Yank naturally took them all. He grabbed the 3 fire demons in his palm like an ordinary person grabbing 3 crystal balls. They fit perfectly. Chao Qingyu was curious and asked Ji Tianxing, "Young master, these fire demons only have the strength of an upper-level divine lord. Do they have any value in keeping them?" Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "Although these fire demons are a type of ferocious beast, strictly speaking, they are not beasts. After all, they're not made of flesh and blood. The 7-colored divine fire in the lava sea and various precious metals were mixed together. After tens of thousands of years of refining and fusing, they gradually developed spirituality and became fire demons. Although they are not very strong and have to rely on the power of the lava sea and the 7-color divine fire to kill the divine lords, they are not very strong. However, they have no life and are extremely difficult to kill, so they are very tenacious. Moreover, by burning and refining them with a secret technique, one can extract the essence of the 7-color divine fire and metals, which can be used as excellent materials for refining equipment." I see. After listening to Ji Tianxing's explanation, Chao Qingyu was enlightened. Yank, on the other hand, was alert. He held the 3 fire demons tightly and said to Ji Tianxing, "Young master, you just said that you would give these 3 fire demons to me. I can't take them back." Chapter 3364. Yank was from the rock race. In detail, he had a close relationship with rocks, earth, metal, and divine fire. Therefore, he had never thought of killing the 3 fire demons. Instead, he wanted to keep them as pets. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and chuckled. "Why are you so nervous? Although the 3 fire demons are interesting, they are not worthy of my attention." "Then I am relieved." Yank heaved a sigh of relief. He nodded and continued to play with the fire demons. President Feng Yin, Vice President, and many Sir Gods were stunned as they watched Ji Tianxing and the other 2 talk. They were shocked and had cold sweat on their backs. What are the realms of the 3 foreign dignitaries? Why do I feel that our president is very respectful to them and listens to them? They are mysterious and no one can see through them. Anyway, they are very powerful. Maybe they are the real experts. Weaklings like us can't understand them. With the 3 foreign dignitaries, we should be safe if we act alone, right? Just as the crowd was discussing and whispering to each other, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the other 2 continued to fly toward Red Rock Island. President Feng Yin and many Sir Gods calmed themselves down and followed them. With the previous lesson, everyone was more cautious. Moreover, they did not dare to fall behind and followed closely behind Ji Tianxing and the other 2. After another 2 hours, they finally arrived at Red Rock Island. It was a reef island with a radius of more than 300 miles. It stood quietly in the lava sea and was nearly 300 feet tall. Most of the island was made up of black and red reefs. That was how the name Red Rock Island came about. In addition, he could clearly see that the undulating reefs were mixed with many colorful colors, flashing with the light of gems and metals. A colorful light shield with a radius of more than 300 miles covered the island like an inverted bowl and sealed the entire Red Rock Island. Seeing this scene, President Feng Yin and Vice President both frowned, revealing a puzzled expression. Strange, why is there a light shield on Red Rock Island? Could it be that someone had already occupied this place? However, which force is so domineering and has such courage and strength? Red Rock Island has always been black and red. Why are there so many colorful areas? Could it be that a large amount of divine stones and metals appeared on this island when the monarch-level divine object appeared and the phenomenon of heaven and earth appeared? Obviously, The Red Rock Island had changed significantly compared to 100 years ago. This change was both good and bad. President Feng Yin couldn't make up his mind. He looked at Ji Tianxing, hoping that he could make a decision. Ji Tianxing had already used the mystic art of God's eye to observe the situation on the Red Rock Island. Just as Wind Yin had guessed, Red Rock Island had already been occupied by a certain force. The God-sovereign experts of that force were busy excavating the rock strata, plundering divine stones and metals. However, this did not affect Ji Tianxing at all. His target was the purple flame divine rock and the king grade divine object that had appeared not long ago. Let's go in and have a look. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and led Chao Qingyu and Yank to the Red Rock Island. Although President Feng Yin, Vice President, and the others were nervous, they still followed. After all, the existence of Ji Tianxing and the other two was their greatest reliance. It gave them great confidence. Swoosh! They landed on the Red Rock Island and stood above the colorful light shield. Ji Tianxing didn't need to do anything. Yank raised his right hand and slammed it down with 50% of his strength. Crack! A crisp cracking sound could be heard as a large crack appeared on the incomparably thick five-colored light barrier. The God-sovereigns of the Wind Yin Society were dumbfounded and shocked. Oh my God, that is a top monarch-level defensive array. How did he split it apart so easily with just a casual palm strike? Originally, I was thinking that we could observe and learn from that guest elder when he cast a spell to break the formation. I didn't expect him to break the array in such a simple and violent way. As the saying goes, one force can break everything. For experts like them, everything is easy. While the God-sovereigns were still discussing, Ji Tianxing and the other two had already passed through the crack and flew into the colorful light shield. President Feng Yin and the God-sovereigns quickly followed and observed the situation on the Red Rock Island. After flying for more than 30 miles, they gradually saw the situation on the Red Rock Island. It turned out that the colorful area on the surface was all ores that contained rare metals and divine rocks. Countless colorful ores were scattered on the island in long strips and formed 3 mineral veins that were 100 miles long. Of course, the colorful ores that were exposed on the ground were only a small part of the mineral veins. Most of the ores were still hidden in the black and red rocks and underground. Other than the 3 mineral veins, there were sporadic ores, divine gold, and gems all over the island. They were all monarch-level upper grade and supreme grade materials. Seeing this, the God-sovereigns of the Wind Hidden Society were extremely excited and cheered excitedly. Ha ha ha! We are rich. 3 mineral veins. How many ores can we mine, and how many top-grade divine rocks, gems, and metals can we smelt? This is a huge fortune. If we mine the 3 mineral veins, our wealth will at least increase by a few times. We have entered the abyss several times and been to the Red Rock Island several times, but we have never seen such rich resources. What a surprise! With a huge amount of wealth and resources in front of them, the God-sovereigns of the Wind Hidden Society were extremely excited. However, the God-sovereigns who had occupied the Red Rock Island in advance were already alarmed. Swoosh! Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Dozens of divine lights lit up in all directions and came as fast as lightning. Soon, they surrounded Ji Tianxing and the others. They could only stop and gather together, looking at the God-sovereigns warily. There were more than 70 God-sovereigns who had gathered around them. Most of them were middle-aged God clan members who were burly and looked stern. These God-sovereigns were wearing standard dragon pattern armor, and they were all above level 5 God-sovereign realm. Most of them were middle God-sovereigns, but there were 20 upper God-sovereigns. There were also 2 God clan men in golden robes with golden dragon patterns embroidered on the lapels. They were obviously the leaders of the God-sovereigns. One of them was a young man with a dignified appearance. He was wearing an exquisite and luxurious divine crown, and he was at level 9 God-sovereign realm. As for the other middle-aged god with a full beard, he had a noble temperament and a graceful appearance. He was actually a Peakser god. More than 70 God-sovereigns in armor were holding spears and swords as they formed a circle. The two men of the God clan in luxurious clothes walked to the middle of the encirclement, arrogantly sizing up Ji Tianxing's group. Who are you? How dare you trespass on the Red Rock Island? Don't you know this is my territory? Chapter 3365. This king, Ji Tianxing, and President Feng Yin frowned at the same time. President Feng Yin's heart skipped a beat as he felt something was amiss. He had been following the three godly kings for the past few days and had witnessed the terrifying strength of a godly king. As a result, when he heard the words "this king," he subconsciously thought that the graceful middle-aged man with a full beard was also a godly king expert. However, when Ji Tianxing said the two words, he had a playful smile on his face. Which kingdom's royal family are you from? President Feng Yin only came back to his senses after Jiang Yi's reminder. After taking a closer look at the middle-aged man, President Feng Yin realized that he was only a peak godly monarch and not a godly king expert. When he thought of this, he heaved a sigh of relief and felt more at ease. Since he wasn't a godly king expert, he must be a king of some kingdom. The Golden Dragon region had 12 empires and over 100 kingdoms. There were too many kings. Even if the other party had a large number of people, there was nothing to be afraid of as Feng Yin had 3 guest elders present. Therefore, President Feng Yin calmed himself down and stared coldly at the middle-aged man. He said in a deep voice, "You are too overbearing. The Red Rock Island is an ownerless land where all the experts can come. When did it become your territory?" The middle-aged man was stunned. He didn't expect President Feng Yin to not be afraid and even dare to talk back to him. The dragon-robed youth was also stunned. He looked at President Feng Yin with pity and shook his head and sneered. The middle-aged man straightened his sleeves and looked at President Feng Yin arrogantly. He scolded, "Old man, do you know who this king is? How dare you talk to this king like this? Are you tired of living?" President Feng Yin couldn't tolerate or back down in front of so many godly monarchs. He sneered, "This king is from the Gaiyi Empire and is the president of the Feng Yin Society. This king would like to know, which kingdom's king are you from? How dare you be so overbearing?" Overbearing? The middle-aged man raised his eyebrows and laughed. "Ha ha, you are right. Overbearing is a synonym for this king. This king is the king of war of the Golden Dragon Empire, the hereditary king of war." "What? The warlord of the Golden Dragon Empire?" President Feng Yin's expression changed on the spot. His eyes widened, and he couldn't help but exclaim in a trembling voice, You're the elder brother of the Golden Dragon Emperor, the warlord who stirred up chaos in half of the Golden Dragon region, the one who killed millions of people?" Probably due to the shock and fear in his heart, Wind Hidden's voice trembled and his tone changed. The vice chairman, the left and right protectors, and a few elders whispered to each other for a while. Their expressions changed drastically, and they were filled with shock. Lord John stroked his beard and sneered. "That's right, I am Lord John. Looks like you're not that ignorant, old man. You've heard of this prince's name. As for killing tens of millions of people, that's just hearsay and malicious slander. This king will punish you." President Feng Yin's body stiffened, and he forced a smile onto his ugly face. He cupped his hands and bowed. "This old man has heard of Lord John's great name, but I've never had the chance to meet you. This is the first time I've seen you, so I've offended you. I hope you'll be magnanimous and not bicker with this old man. Since Lord John came to Red Rock Island first and set up a sealing formation here, there's always first order. First come, first served. This old man would never dare to compete with the war monarch." President Feng Yin smiled and bowed to Lord John. However, he didn't mention the matter of killing tens of millions of people. He clearly didn't want to anger Lord John. Lord John frowned, and his eyes flashed with disdain. He roared, "Since you know how powerful this king is, why don't you kneel and admit your wrongs? Then get the hell out of Red Rock Island. Don't waste this king's time." The dragon-robed youth's face was also full of disdain. He sneered mockingly, "A bunch of spineless trash. What are you standing around for? Royal Uncle is in a good mood today, so you're lucky to keep your worthless lives. If you dilly-dally any longer, this king will slaughter all of you and feed you to the dogs." Such arrogant words humiliated the Sir Gods of the Hidden Wind Society. Their faces turned red, and they were both embarrassed and angry. However, they could only suppress their anger and didn't dare to retort. President Feng Yin was also in a dilemma. He was full of hesitation and was anxiously thinking about what to do. At this moment, Yang couldn't hold back his anger and killing intent. He roared, "Fuck! Which blind dog dares to act so arrogantly in front of me? You must be tired of living." As he spoke, Yang clenched his fists and was about to start another massacre. President Feng Yin shuddered in fright. He quickly rushed over and stood in front of Yan Ko. He advised anxiously, "Calm down. You must calm down. You can't fight. You can't fight. Don't get us killed." Yank lowered his head and glanced at him. He gently swung his ankle and flung President Feng Yin away. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing raised his hand and stopped the furious yank. He looked at President Feng Yin expressionlessly and asked, "The Zhan Prince is so arrogant and humiliated you to this extent. Aren't you angry at all? You don't even dare to resist?" President Feng Yin quickly waved his hand and used his divine sense to send a message. He smiled bitterly and said, "Young Master Ji, you don't know. The Zhan Prince is infamous in the entire Golden Dragon domain. We can't afford to offend him." Ji Tianxing sneered and raised his eyebrows. He asked, "This king wants to know why we can't afford to offend him?" Feng Yin calmed his emotions and gave a brief explanation. The Golden Dragon Empire is the head of the 12 empires in the Golden Dragon domain. Its national strength is boundless, and it suppresses the surrounding 12 empires. This is because the Golden Dragon Emperor is the last disciple of the Domain Lord. The Zhan Prince is the Golden Dragon Emperor's elder brother and is loyal to him. He has made great contributions. Therefore, the Zhan Prince is one of the most respected experts in the Golden Dragon Empire. He is very arrogant and overbearing. He is cruel and merciless. He kills people like flies and treats the lives of his people like grass. In the past, 2 empires were dissatisfied with his indiscriminate killing of the innocent. Many experts jointly condemned him. In the end, he caused a shocking massacre in those 2 empires. He massacred several cities and killed at least 10 million people. He even threatened the emperors of those 2 empires. If they dared to slander him again, he would kill those 2 emperors and change the ruler of those 2 empires. This matter caused a huge commotion, and almost everyone in the Golden Dragon domain knew about it. Several emperors jointly wrote a letter to the Domain Lord, hoping that the Domain Lord could intervene and punish the Zhan Prince, who knew that the Domain Lord didn't show up and didn't care about this matter. In the end, the emperors made a big fuss, and the Domain Lord sent an envoy to the Golden Dragon Empire to reprimand the Zhan Prince and punish him. Tell me, after this matter, who in the Golden Dragon domain would dare to offend the Zhan Prince? Chapter 3366. Ji Tianxing had reason to believe that the Zhan Prince's evil deeds were far more than this. But due to time constraints, President Feng Yin could only give a brief introduction. From those few words, he understood. No wonder Feng Yin was so afraid of the War Prince. Ji Tianxing looked at President Feng Yin and asked with a faint smile, "It seems like you plan to kneel down and beg for mercy from the Zhan Prince, then run away from Red Rock Island with your tail between your legs?" President Feng Yin's face was red with shame and anger. He nodded and said, "If there is no accident, then this is probably the only way. After all, this old man has to look at the big picture. I can't ruin the 10,000 years of foundation of the Wind Hidden Society for the sake of face and dignity." Ji Tianxing understood the meaning behind his words and guessed his thoughts. He nodded expressionlessly and said, "All right, then you can go." President Feng Yin was astonished. He muttered with a strange expression, "Young Master Ji, you really? Then this old man will go and apologize?" Ji Tianxing's expression was still indifferent. President Feng Yin lowered his head resentfully and slowly turned to leave. He began to brew his emotions. He suppressed the humiliation and prepared to kneel down and apologize to the Zhan Prince. Chao Qingyu silently watched and didn't comment. He sighed in his heart. This old man is too slick and cowardly. He is used to scheming. This king has already warned him, but he didn't listen. Now, the young master is clearly disappointed and wants to abandon the wind-hidden society. President Feng Yin walked to the front of the crowd and faced the Jean Prince and the dragon-robed youth. He slowly bent his knees and was about to kneel down. At this time, the Jean Prince waved his hand and coldly shouted with a dark face, "Wait!" His face was gloomy and his eyes flashed with killing intent. He pointed to the most conspicuous Yank in the crowd and said, "This stone monster seems to be very arrogant. He is not convinced by this king. The bastard who broke the defensive array was also him, right? Old man, this king is in a very bad mood. If you want this king to spare your dog lives, then all of you must kneel down and kowtow to this king 3 times. Furthermore, you still have to chop off the stone monster's 2 arms to appease this king's anger. If you can't do it, then you'll all die here. The first prince will chop you up and feed you to the dogs." This, President Feng Yin's body shook, and his expression became more and more ugly. He really wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had seen with his own eyes how strong Yank was. Asked him to cut off Yank's arms? He had no doubt that if he dared to make a move, Yank would break his neck. But if he did not comply, the war prince would kill everyone present and the Hidden Wind Society would be completely finished. Moreover, the young man in the dragon robe beside the war prince was actually the crown prince of the Golden Dragon Empire. This was the Golden Dragon Emperor's eldest son, the legitimate crown prince, and the future successor to the throne. If the Hidden Wind Society showed the slightest disrespect, they would offend the Golden Dragon Empire and would definitely be eradicated in the future. What to do? President Feng Yin's body stiffened as he painfully closed his eyes and fell into a battle between heaven and man. At this time, Yank's anger had reached its limit and completely exploded. I just killed a group of idiots who were courting death, and I didn't expect another ignorant beast to come to me. Since you're so eager to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Yank was so angry that he laughed. His body burst into flames of anger, and his murderous aura surged out. The war prince raised his eyebrows in surprise and sneered mockingly. You know my name, but you still don't know what's good for you. How dare you provoke me? I really don't know if you're brave or stupid. All Imperial Guards, listen to my order. Chop that stone monster into pieces and kill everyone." With the war prince's order, more than 70 Imperial Army captains wearing silver armor all said in unison, "Yes." They all waved their spears and swords, and used their unique skills to besiege Yank. Suddenly, the Red Rock Island shone with divine light and murderous aura. Seeing this, President Feng Yin was filled with despair. He murmured dejectedly, "It's over. The Feng Yin sect is completely finished." The vice president and the left and right protectors rushed over and pulled him far away to hide behind Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu. Ji Tianxing and Chao Qingyu had no intention of attacking. Ji Tianxing looked indifferent. Chao Qingyu looked coldly at the war prince and the crown prince. He murmured, "You can't stop someone who wants to die." At the same time, Yang's body was surrounded by flames as he rushed toward the war prince and the crown prince. He waved his fists and released endless divine power, forming 2 mountain-sized flaming fists that smashed toward the Imperial Guards. The 2 huge fists were formed by the 7-colored Earth Core divine fire, and they were extremely powerful. There was even lightning in the fists, as if they were the wrath of the heavens. Before the fists arrived, the terrifying divine power pressed down, causing the Imperial Guards to be filled with fear and their movements to become sluggish. Bam! 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 In the blink of an eye, the divine art shadows that were attacking Yin Ke from all directions were shattered by the 2 fist radiances. Even if some of the sword light hit Yank, it was like scratching an itch and did not cause any damage. On the other hand, the 2 mountain-sized fist auras smashed into the crowd and struck more than 20 captains of the Imperial Army. With a loud rumble, the 27 captains of the Imperial Army were smashed into pieces, and their divine bodies were burned to ashes. Of course, their divine sparks were not spared either. In the blink of an eye, they were burned to ashes by the seven-colored divine fire. Fortunately, the war prince and the crown prince had retreated in time, and the imperial guards had neutralized the power of the fists. The two of them were not hit by the fists. Even so, when they saw the 27 captains of the imperial army being killed in an instant, they were still filled with shock and fear. Walala, fragments of divine light, mixed with countless rocks and dust, fell from the sky as if it was raining cats and dogs. The remaining 50 captains of the imperial army, the war kings, and the first prince all stood frozen in fear, their faces covered in disbelief. After a long while, the crown prince came to his senses and could not help but gasp. What a ferocious monster! The war prince's face was very gloomy. He forced himself to suppress his shock and glared at Yank. He sneered. Very well. You monster is very strong. No wonder you dare to go against me. But don't be happy too early. In the entire Golden Dragon domain, no one has dared to go against me and live to this day. The wind-hidden society of the Gaia Empire, right? I will remember this. Today's matter is over. You can all get lost. Although the war prince was arrogant and overbearing, he was not a brainless person. Seeing how terrifying Yank's strength was, he did not want to waste any more time. Otherwise, his and the crown prince's lives would be in danger. However, Yank grinned and mocked contemptuously. I'm going to start a massacre and kill all of you. You did not run away, nor did you kneel and beg for mercy. You want us to get lost from Red Rock Island? Is your brain filled with shit? Chapter 3367. The Jean Prince admitted that Yank was very strong. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. So he temporarily swallowed his anger and stopped fighting with the wind-hidden society. However, it was impossible for him to bow his head and admit his mistake or give up Red Rock Island. After all, his arrogance, and domineeringness had been maintained for thousands of years and had long since been deeply rooted. He didn't think that the other party would dare to do anything to him. However, Yank's attitude was aggressive and even more domineering than him. How could he stand it? He glared at Yanku and said in a cold tone, "Damn beast, how dare you talk to this king like that? Do you want the Hidden Wind Society to be annihilated and not even a chicken or dog will be left alive?" At the same time, the first prince secretly gave an order for the 20 overseer gods who were still excavating the mineral vein to gather at the scene. He also showed the dignity of the Golden Dragon Empire's crown prince and shouted at Feng Yin, "Feng Yin, do you know what you are doing? The Jean Prince and I represent the Golden Dragon Empire and the entire Golden Dragon domain. Do you insist on going against the Golden Dragon Empire? Do you want to go against the entire Golden Dragon domain? If you leave Red Rock Island now, I can pretend that nothing happened and won't pursue the Wind-Hidden Society's crimes. However, if you dare to provoke me and the Jean Prince again, you will have to think about the consequences." The Jean Prince had always been domineering, so he naturally couldn't back down. However, the first prince was very smart and made an appropriate concession. He didn't want to fight for real. In his eyes, he and the Jean Prince were spiritual jades, while the Wind-Hidden Society were lowly tiles. How could they fight to the death? Their lives were much more precious than the Wind-Hidden Society's. Seeing that the first prince had backed down and left some leeway for both sides, Feng Yin was relieved and immediately nodded in agreement. However, Yank didn't waver. He was still full of killing intent and vowed to kill the Jean Prince and the others. In desperation, Feng Yin could only ask Ji Tianxing for help. He pleaded, "Young Master Ji, since the Golden Dragon Crown Prince has backed down, why don't we just let it go? The Golden Dragon Crown Prince is right. They're the most respected figures in the Golden Dragon realm. We can't offend them." Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Take the people of the Hidden Wind Society and leave this place." President Feng Yin was stunned for a moment. Then, he nervously asked, "Young Master Ji, don't tell me. You're not leaving with us?" Ji Tianxing didn't answer. He just glanced at him coldly. President Feng Yin's body trembled. He could see the coldness in his eyes. Chao Qingyu reminded him through telepathy, "Old man Feng, it's because you think too much and think too much that you keep making stupid mistakes." Young master's meaning was clear. You can leave. What happens next is not something you have the right to participate in. Moreover, the young master wants you to leave now to protect you. Don't you understand? After saying that, Chao Qingyu walked past him and followed Ji Tianxing to Yang's side. President Feng Yin immediately understood their intentions when he saw that the three of them didn't retreat. Moreover, their attitude was very firm and tough. President Feng Yin only hesitated for a moment before he made a decision. Retreat. He took the remaining 20 Sir Gods of the Hidden Wind Society and left the Red Rock Island as fast as possible. Although this meant that the Hidden Wind Society would part ways with the three foreign dignitaries. In the future, the Hidden Wind Society wouldn't be able to rely on the three Divine Kings to gain any benefits. However, if they left the Red Rock Island now, they could at least draw a clear line between themselves and the Golden Dragon Empire. After all, the Immortals could only retreat when the Immortals fought. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With a flash of divine light, President Feng Yin took the 20 Sir Gods and left the Red Rock Island in a hurry. However, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were still on the island. They had no intention of leaving. The Zhan Prince and the eldest prince both frowned and stared at them coldly. The people of the Hidden Wind Society have all left. Why are you still here? Are you not from the Hidden Wind Society? Or do you want to betray the Hidden Wind Society and die? Don't forget that there are only 3 of you. The Zhan Prince and I have over 100 Sir Gods under our command. They are all elites of the Golden Dragon Empire. The Zhan Prince was still arrogant and overbearing, while the eldest prince was more rational and calm in his arrogance. Unfortunately, no matter what they said, it was useless. Ji Tianxing pointed at the Red Rock Island under his feet and said expressionlessly, "We are not leaving because there is something that I want here. Although I don't want to waste time, I won't allow clowns to jump around in front of me. I will only say this once. You have only 2 choices. Either leave the Red Rock Island or die here." As soon as he said this, the Zhan Prince was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. The eldest prince also frowned. His eyes were cold as he asked in a low voice, "Kid, are you serious? Think carefully about the consequences of offending the Golden Dragon Empire and the zone leader." Yang's patience had reached its limit. He shouted angrily, "Think my ass. So much nonsense. Go to hell, you little bastard." As he spoke, Yank waved his giant hands and shot out a 7-color divine fire that covered the sky. It blasted towards the Zhan Prince and the eldest prince with destructive lightning. There were more than 100 Sir Gods in the surroundings who were holding onto their sabers, spears, swords, and halberds. They were ready to strike. Seeing Yank attack, without the Zhan Prince and the eldest prince's orders, everyone roared and attacked. Kill them. Protect the Crown Prince and the Zhan Prince. Many of the Sir Gods used their unique skills and divine powers to attack Yank. As they blocked the divine fire, they used their divine powers to attack. More than 20 Sir Gods formed a barrier in front of the Zhan Prince and the eldest prince. In the next moment, the entire Red Rock Island was shaking with a series of muffled bangs. The divine abilities cast by the divine lords were all destroyed by the divine fire that filled the sky. Endless divine light shards burst out in all directions. The 7-colored divine flames poured down like a torrential flood, and the peerlessly violent lightning struck many divine sovereigns. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen Sir Gods were engulfed by the divine fire. Their bodies were charred black, and their limbs were broken by the lightning. However, the Zhan Prince and the eldest prince were unharmed. They were furious. They took out their Kenshin weapons and used their most powerful unique skills to attack Yank. He watched as more than 80 Sir God experts joined forces to attack Yin Ke. Yin Ke's various mystiques were neutralized by the joint forces of the crowd. Chao Qingyu attacked decisively. He waved his dark blue divine sword and joined the battle. Divine sword aura covered the sky. The combination of 2 divine kings was indeed extraordinary. Not only did an invisible power cover the entire Red Rock Island, but also suppressed all the Ser gods. The divine fire, lightning, and sword flashes that filled the sky completely suppressed the attacks of the Ser gods. They were beaten to a pulp and suffered heavy casualties. Chapter 33:68. The two sides weren't at the same level, so there was a huge difference in power. Yank was a middle divine king, so he only needed to spend some time and effort to defeat the war prince and hundreds of divine emperors. But after Chao Qingyu joined the battle, it was much easier for him, and he saved a lot of time. In addition, although Ji Tianxing didn't attack, he secretly released an invisible power that covered the entire Red Rock Island. The war prince, the crown prince, and hundreds of divine emperors were suppressed. Their movements were slowed, and their divine power was blocked. They could only use 50 to 60% of their power. Under such circumstances, the battle became a one-sided massacre. In just 15 minutes, more than 50 divine emperors were killed by Chao Qingyu and Yank. The shockwaves from the battle between the two sides shattered the defensive formation that sealed Red Rock Island. The multicolored divine power shockwaves spread out in all directions. They rushed out of Red Rock Island and stirred up huge waves in the lava sea. The lava sea within a few thousand miles was boiling. The seven-color divine fire was also extremely violent. After President Feng Yin and the 20 divine emperors left the Red Rock Island, they didn't want to go too far. They stopped above the lava sea 3,000 miles away from the Red Rock Island and watched the battle from afar. President Feng Yin didn't want to leave just like that. He wanted to see the result of the battle. He wanted to know the result of the battle so that he could decide what to do next and how to deal with it. However, when the aftermath of the battle hit and the lava sea within a few thousand miles was boiling, he had to retreat 10,000 miles away with the divine emperors under his command. They were 10,000 miles away from the Red Rock Island and separated by the boiling lava sea, so they couldn't see the situation on the island. They could only use their divine senses to observe the situation on the Red Rock Island. But the Red Rock Island was in chaos and the divine power was chaotic. They couldn't see clearly. Seeing this, the vice president and the left and right protectors tried to persuade President Feng Yin. President, do we still need to watch? They have already fought to such an extent. No matter who wins, the three foreign elders have already offended the Golden Dragon Empire. Yes, those three fellows are all God King powerhouses. They are fated not to remain in our wind-hidden guild. Since the president has decided to cut ties with them, we should leave this place as soon as possible. Why should we stay here and watch the battle? If the three God Kings win this battle, the Golden Dragon Empire will definitely hunt them down. Even the governor will be alerted. When this matter becomes big, our Hidden Wind Society will also be punished by the Golden Dragon Empire. If the three divine kings lost, with the war prince's tyrannical nature, he would definitely kill them. This way, the war prince and the first prince will have their hatred resolved, and we will have cleared our ties in time. Perhaps there is still a chance of survival. Not long ago, Guild Master Feng Yin had explained the origins of the three foreign officials to everyone. Only then did everyone know that those three divine king powerhouses were only temporarily acting as the Hidden Wind Society's guest retainers. Under such circumstances, not only did the crowd not have a good impression of the three God Kings, they even felt some hatred for them. Everyone firmly believed that if it weren't for those three divine kings, their alliance with the four great factions wouldn't have been broken, and they wouldn't have offended the Golden Dragon Empire. Now that Hidden Wind Society had ended up like this, it was all because of those three divine kings. As long as the Hidden Wind Society could clear their ties and escape the Golden Dragon Empire's punishment, they would rather the three divine kings die on Red Rock Island. Hearing everyone's repeated persuasion, Guild Master Feng Yin's determination wavered. Although he was the president, he couldn't be stubborn. He had to listen to the opinions of the vice president, protectors, and elders. Thus, he nodded and agreed to everyone's request. Let's leave this place as soon as possible, and we can't be seen by the other factions. As for the result of the battle, I believe that there will be news soon, and we will know when the time comes. Everyone acknowledged the order and hurriedly followed President Feng Yin to fly further away. At the same time, The battle on Red Rock Island was about to come to an end. More than half of the 100 Sir Gods were killed, and only 20 or so people were still fighting. However, the surviving divine monarchs were the same as Prince Jean and the First Prince. They were heavily injured and covered in blood. At this point, the War Prince and the First Prince no longer hoped to defeat their opponents. They knew that the Rock Monster and the Green Robe Man were both divine King Realm experts. As for the white-robed human youth, he didn't make a move at all. He just watched the battle calmly. That guy was the leader of the Rock Monster and the Green Robe Man, and his strength was even more terrifying. At this point, the War Prince and the First Prince finally understood why their opponents were so tough and arrogant. Because they had the right to look down on the Golden Dragon Empire. The more they thought about it, the more desperate they became. One of them ordered all the Sir Gods to cover their escape, while the other sent a message jade slip to the imperial family of the Golden Dragon Empire for help. Even if they were to die on Red Rock Island and be killed by the two Sir Gods, they couldn't die without knowing why. They had to report this matter to the imperial family and let the Golden Dragon Emperor know. This way, even if they were killed, the Golden Dragon Empire would at least avenge them. The Golden Dragon Empire didn't have the strength to deal with the Sir Gods, and the Golden Dragon Region Master was behind the Empire. The War Prince and the First Prince believed that no matter how strong the three Sir Gods were, they couldn't be stronger than the Region Master. Whoosh! With a flash of divine light, a special message jade slip flashed across the sky above Red Rock Island and disappeared in an instant. The War Prince and the First Prince heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that the message jade slip had been sent out. The 20 or so injured Sir Gods didn't have any more worries. They covered the War Prince and the First Prince's retreat with their lives. They were extremely loyal to the Golden Dragon Empire. Even if they knew that they were going to die, they still charged forward without any hesitation. They used their lives to buy time for the War Prince and the First Prince to escape. This move was indeed effective. When there were only 9 Sir Gods left, the War Prince and the First Prince had already escaped to the edge of Red Rock Island. However, it was useless even if they escaped from Red Rock Island. Yank and Chao Qingyu chased after them relentlessly and swore to kill them all. Not long after, the 9 Sir Gods were killed one after another. Only the War Prince and the First Prince survived to the end. They were also covered in blood and looked miserable. They had only flown a few hundred miles away from Red Rock Island when they were stopped by Yank and Chao Qingyu. They had no choice but to stop running. Standing above the sea of lava, they glared at Yank and Chao Qingyu and cursed viciously. "You're really crazy. I'm the crown prince of the Golden Dragon Empire. The Empire will definitely take revenge with all its might. If we can't live, you'll die too. We'll all die together. Even if you're very powerful and can kill us, so what? You're already the enemy of the Golden Dragon Empire. The region leader won't let you go either. Even if I die here, you won't be able to leave the Golden Dragon region alive." Hearing their roars, Yank sneered with disdain. "You're about to die, and you still have so much to say." Then, he waved his fists and threw out a destructive fist aura. Bang bang. With 2 loud explosions, the War Prince and the First Prince were smashed into pieces and their divine heads collapsed. Chapter 33:69. With the death of the War Prince and the First Prince, the battle was over. Their corpses and shards of Godhead drifted into the sea of lava. Silence returned to the area. Yank clenched his fists and sneered, restraining his killing intent. Ji Tianxing didn't say much, but Chao Qingyu sighed with emotion. If the War Prince hadn't been so arrogant and overbearing, how could he have ended up like this? From this, it can be seen that evil is doomed to destruction. There's always a taller mountain. If you want to live long, you have to keep a low profile. Who would have thought that Yank would shoot him a disdainful glance and sneer? Low profile my ass. Those 2 bastards just now dared to be so arrogant without strength. Aren't they just courting death? Only those with strength can be arrogant and not be beaten. Chao Qingyu couldn't be bothered to argue with him. He hurriedly followed Ji Tianxing back to Red Rock Island. On the way, he secretly transmitted his voice to Ji Tianxing. "Young master, although you've subdued Yank, I still feel that this guy is unruly and seems to have some resentment in his heart. He doesn't dare express his dissatisfaction with you, so he's venting his anger on others. If you don't have full confidence, it's best to restrain him, lest in the future. Chao Qingyu wanted to say that if Ji Tianxing were to run into trouble in the future, Yank might take the opportunity to kill him. But he felt that he couldn't say such things, or he would be suspected of sowing discord. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing understood his meaning and replied, "You don't have to worry about that. Yank's life is in my hands, and his life is in my hands. Unless he doesn't want to live, he won't dare disobey me. After all, he's the ruler of a region and has enjoyed great wealth and respect. Now that he's fallen into my hands and become my servant, he's naturally full of resentment. It's fine to let him vent for a while. They're all unimportant people anyway. As time passes, his emotions will calm down, and I will naturally have a way to make him calm down." Hearing this, Chao Qingyu's worries dissipated, and he nodded to show that he understood. Soon, the three of them returned to Red Rock Island. Standing in the sky above the Red Rock Island, the three of them looked down at the entire island, using their spiritual consciousness to observe the situation on the island and underground. Chao Qingyu took the initiative to ask, "Young master, the Red Rock Island is rich in resources, and the most valuable are the 3 mineral veins. Friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading." Other than that, the island was also littered with a large number of divine stones and metal ores. "Where do you think we should start?" Ji Tianxing pointed at the ore vein in the southeast and said with a smile, "Share blessings and misfortunes together. That load is mine. Yank will help me mine it. As for the remaining 2 mineral veins and all the resources on the island, you can all mine as you wish." After that, he woke up everyone in the divine ship and divine tower. Soon, Lin Shui, blood illusion god, gold left emissary, blood dragon right emissary, Niefiyun, white dragon, and Zhenhong all appeared on the Red Rock Island. Chao Qingyu also woke up Lan under Ji Tianxing's instructions. When everyone heard Ji Tianxing's summons, they thought it was an emergency, so they hurried over. Seeing the Red Rock Island under their feet and the magma sea around them, they were a little confused. After Chao Qingyu explained, they understood the reason. Immediately, they were surprised and excited, and burst into cheers. "Oh my God! Such a huge divine stone mineral vein! At least 20 to 30 billion divine stones can be refined. Are you really giving it to us? Young master, you are too generous. The 2 mineral veins are worth at least 30 billion, and there are so many monarch-level materials. It's priceless. We're rich. We didn't do anything when we followed young master, but we picked up a windfall for free. We'll wake up laughing even in our dreams, all right? Everyone, don't just stand there. Hurry up and dig. Don't disappoint the young master's good intentions." After a round of cheering, everyone immediately threw themselves into the excavation work, except for the mine in the southeast, which was reserved for Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing would supervise Yank's mining. The other 2 mineral veins, as well as the scattered divine stones and ores on the island, were quickly distributed. Then, everyone displayed their abilities and used all kinds of methods to quickly excavate the ore veins and divine stones. Although the ground and rock layers were extremely hard, the mining process was a bit difficult. However, it was fortunate that the ground and rocks were hard enough that they were not destroyed by the previous battle. Otherwise, the entire Red Rock Island would have been destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. Everyone was immersed in joy. They worked hard to mine the ores, and their harvests were bountiful. On the other side, Yank was mining under the supervision of Ji Tianxing. The vein that Ji Tianxing had chosen contained the aura of the purple flame divine stone. Friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. Although the vein was dozens of miles long and tens of thousands of feet wide, it could produce tens of billions of divine stones. However, there were only a few pieces of purple flame divine stone in the vein. This meant that they had to mine the entire vein to find the purple flame divine stone. Ji Tianxing estimated that with Yank's mining speed, they would be able to complete it in 4 or 5 days. However, Yang's actions and appearance as he mined the vein made Ji Tianxing frown. He waved his palms and condensed divine light blades. He constantly dug the rocks on both sides of the vein and cut the huge ores. All the ores were cut into the size of water tanks and neatly placed beside Ji Tianxing. He was a divine king and had abundant divine power. Cutting rocks and ores was like cutting vegetables. He did not feel tired no matter how much divine power he used. However, this method was too inefficient and time-consuming. Ji Tianxing frowned and observed for a moment. He could not help but ask, "Yank, are you purposely stalling for time in a fit of pique?" Yank, who was working hard, was stunned. He turned to look at Qin Lai with a puzzled expression. "Why would I be angry? And why am I stalling for time? Did I do something wrong?" Ji Tianxing saw that his expression did not seem to be fake. He reminded him, "Don't forget, you are the rock race. You rock race have several divine abilities and secret skills that are related to earth and metal. Using your divine abilities and consummate skills, you can travel through the earth, excavate veins, and tunnel much faster than ordinary God race members. Moreover, the rock race also has a very special divine ability and consummate skill that allows them to finish smelting ores and metals in a very short time. Not only can this consummate skill purify ores and metals, it can also separate metals and metals of various attributes." Is there such a thing?" Yang showed a very puzzled expression and asked, "I know how to travel through the earth, control the power of earth and earth fire. But why haven't I learned the divine abilities of excavating veins, underground tunnels, and smelting ores and metals you mentioned? Are they really as amazing as you say?" Ji Tianxing was speechless. He thought for a moment and guessed the reason. "I understand now. Your father and the elders of the race have all learned these divine abilities and consummate skills. However, your talent is not high, and you find it too slow to cultivate the important battle skills, so you have not reached perfection. Naturally, your father was unwilling to teach you unorthodox divine abilities like smelting ores and metals that have no destructive power." Chapter 3370. As Ji Tianxing guessed the reason, Yank nodded repeatedly to express his agreement. "If my race really has the ultimate skill you speak of, then you should have guessed correctly. Father must have been afraid that I would waste time and energy cultivating an unorthodox divine ability, which would affect my main cultivation method, so he didn't teach it to me." After saying this, Yank thought carefully for a while and asked again, "Right, when I was at the Divine Lord realm, I already mastered the 5 elements divine Tao laws of earth, fire, and metal. I don't need to use the ultimate skill of my race. Just the power of the 5 elements divine Tao should be able to mine ore veins very quickly, right?" Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "Using the power of the 5 elements divine Tao to mine ore veins is of course faster than your current stupid method. However, that's only 3 to 5 times faster than your current speed. The ultimate skill of the rock race I'm talking about is more than 10 times faster than your current speed. Moreover, mastering that kind of divine ability will bring about all kinds of conveniences and effects, far more than just smelting or in metal. It will also greatly benefit you in refining divine artifacts and setting up divine formations." Yank listened attentively, and his heart was filled with anticipation. He looked at Ji Tianxing with shining eyes and tried to squeeze out a smile, asking, "My father didn't teach me the ultimate skill you speak of. I can't go back to my race's library and look for related secret manuals right now. You know my race very well, and you're very clear about that kind of ultimate skill. Then you should maybe know the cultivation method of that kind of divine ability. If that kind of ultimate skill could only be used for mining and smelting, or Yank might not be interested. However, Ji Tianxing said that mastering that kind of ultimate skill would be greatly beneficial for refining artifacts and setting up formations, and had many other special effects. This made Yank very interested and eager to cultivate it. However, he was also very nervous. He didn't know if Ji Tianxing had grasped the cultivation method, and he didn't know if Ji Tianxing was willing to teach it. Therefore, he stuttered when he spoke, and his tone was somewhat lacking in confidence and uncertainty. Ji Tianxing was not surprised. Yang's reaction was within his expectations. Therefore, he stared at Yang with a solemn expression and asked in a low voice, "That's the rock race's ultimate skill. How would I know? You're a disciple of the cliff race, yet you're not proficient in the secret arts of your race. You're actually asking me, an outsider?" Yank was speechless after being lectured. He was quite embarrassed, and his tanned face was a little red. However, his heart was itching unbearably, and he couldn't help but mumble, "That, my lord, you know my clan like the back of your hand. I'm guessing that you have some sort of relationship with my clan. You might even know my father. Therefore, if you have mastered the cultivation method of that kind of divine ability, please do not hesitate to teach me. I will be very grateful." Pausing for a moment, he added, "Even if it's just a superficial knowledge or a rudimentary cultivation method of that kind of divine ability, I'll be satisfied." At this moment, Yank was no longer as arrogant and haughty as before. He didn't have any of the domineering and arrogant air of a domain lord. In front of Ji Tianxing, he was more like a junior or disciple who was thirsting for knowledge. Seeing that his performance was acceptable, Ji Tianxing finally relaxed and asked with a frown, "That's a genuine king-grade divine ability. Once you learn it, you'll be able to move unhindered in the underground world. Who knows how many people want to learn it secretly? If I teach it to you so easily, how do you plan to repay me?" Yank was stunned for a moment. He scratched his head and muttered, "I'm now your follower and guard. Isn't that repayment?" "Bullshit." Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "How can this be repayment? This is your punishment for losing to me." Yank thought seriously for a moment and said with a serious expression, "As long as you teach me that divine ability, I promise I won't hate you anymore. In the future, when you're in danger, I won't hit you when you're down and take the opportunity to bite you. If you don't believe me, I can swear." Ji Tianxing was stunned. He didn't expect that Yank would be so honest and tell him his true thoughts. Moreover, in order to gain his trust, he really raised his arm and prepared to swear to the heavens. Seeing his silly look, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but laugh and wave his hand. "Forget it. As long as you can fulfill your promise, there's no need to swear." After he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and channeled his qi with a solemn expression. After a while, a walnut-sized, dark golden ball of light flew out from between his eyebrows and slowly flew to Yank. This golden ball of light was very dazzling and contained a vast and mighty divine power. It was obviously extraordinary. Ji Tianxing looked at Yank and said, "That divine ability is called the Earth Golden Cloud spell. It's a king-grade divine ability with dozens of effects and magical uses. The cultivation method of this divine ability, as well as some techniques and tricks, as well as my understanding of this divine ability, are all recorded in this golden ball of light. Quickly refine it, and you'll be able to quickly master this divine ability. With your strength and realm, you should be able to learn it within a day. Of course, if your talent and comprehension are higher, perhaps half a day will be enough." Yank stared at the dark golden ball of light, full of joy and anticipation. However, when he heard the last sentence, he couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He was a little depressed and unconvinced. He couldn't help but mutter, "I've only cultivated for 10,000 years, and I've already become a middle divine king. There's no one faster than me in the surrounding dozens of domains. With this, how can my talent and comprehension be considered bad?" Logically speaking, Yang's talent and aptitude weren't bad for him to have such achievements. In the God realm, where geniuses and experts were as common as clouds, he was at least a first-rate genius. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing nodded and said seriously, "Yes, it's quite bad." Yin Ku felt even more depressed after receiving such a blow. "Anyway, my life is in your hands. You can say whatever you want. Also, compared to a mysterious and abnormal guy like you, no one dares to call themselves geniuses." Yank thought silently and didn't dwell on this matter anymore. He followed Ji Tianxing's instructions and hurriedly absorbed the ball of golden light. He sat cross-legged on the ground and focused on refining it. In order to prove that he wasn't mediocre, he was especially focused and worked hard. In the end, he didn't even use a day. In a short 20 hours, he had mastered the rare earth golden cloud art and successfully learned it. After he finished cultivating, he looked at Ji Tianxing excitedly and said, "I didn't use a day. My talent and aptitude aren't bad, right?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "That's only 4 hours. You're still far from being a top genius. Don't waste time. Hurry up and get to work." Yang's joy and anticipation were once again extinguished. He could only resentfully use his ultimate skill, shooting out countless strands of golden light into the ground and enveloping the mine. This skill was indeed extraordinary. Under Yang's control, the mine quickly separated from the rock strata and drilled out of the ground bit by bit. Chapter 3371. Originally, the lode was hidden deep underground, sandwiched between hard and thick rock strata. However, Yang used his ultimate skill to control thousands of strands of golden light to wrap around the lode. Under the special effect of divine power, the lode was separated from the rock strata and lifted out of the ground by Yang. Moreover, when the lode was lifted out of the ground, it was quickly smelted by the power of divine power to remove a large amount of impurities. When the lode was completely lifted out of the ground, the original ores were shrunk by 7 to 8 times and became very pure divine stones. The most amazing thing was that the various ores contained in the lode were also smelted separately. There were colorful gems that contained divine power of different attributes. There were also sparkling and translucent divine stones that contained abundant and pure divine power. There were also metals of various colors that were free of impurities and shone with dazzling divine light. Of course, the gems, divine stones, and metals were all cut into walnut-sized pieces by Yang using divine power and piled up neatly in front of Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was quite satisfied with this and finally showed a gratified smile. He put all the gems and divine stones into his spatial ring. Yang was also greatly shocked and curious. He couldn't help but exclaim, "This is incredible. Why didn't I notice before that my race has such a magical ultimate skill?" Under normal circumstances, at least 3 to 4 people are needed to complete the excavation, smelting, and purification of a lode in a short time. I didn't expect that I would finish all the work alone, and the efficiency would be more than 10 times higher. After exclaiming, he looked at Ji Tianxing with shining eyes and said, "Young master, you didn't lie to me." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a smile, "I've never lied. Now that you've just started, when you cultivate this skill to perfection, the efficiency will be increased by another 10 times. Moreover, you'll be able to discover even more effects and magical uses. Of course, don't forget your promise." Yang hurriedly nodded and said solemnly, "Of course I won't forget." After a pause, he asked again, "Young master, you seem to know more about my race than I do. You're obviously a human, so why?" While everyone was happy, he finally asked the question that had been in his heart. Ji Tianxing said with a playful smile, "When I can trust you in the future, I'll tell you the reason." Yank was a little disappointed and asked again, "You not only have the complete cultivation method of the Earth Golden Cloud technique, you also have a unique understanding of it. Then you must have mastered other skills of my race. You can teach me a few more powerful skills?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said, "Of course I have more powerful skills, but I can't bite. However, you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. Once you've mastered this Earth Golden Cloud art, I'll consider teaching you other divine abilities." Yanks. However, he understood what Ji Tianxing meant, so he quickly patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, young master. I'll definitely obey your orders and do my best for you." That's more like it. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and showed an expression that said, "This kid is worth teaching." Yang didn't waste any more time and continued to use his skills to excavate and refine the ore veins. His progress was very fast. On average, he could excavate half a mile of ore veins in 2 hours and refine more than 30 million pieces of godstones, gems, and metals. At this speed, he could finish excavating more than 30 miles of ore veins in 3 days. Apart from the purple flame godstones in the ore veins, Ji Tianxing's resources and treasures were worth at least 10 billion. Not far away, Chao Qingyu, Lin Shui, and the others were also busy excavating the ore veins. They divided up the work. Some used the power of the 5 elements to excavate and divide the ore. Some used divine furnaces, cauldrons, and arrays to refine and purify the ore to obtain pure gems, godstones, and metals. Under normal circumstances, this was a more efficient way of mining. But even so, with so many people, it would take them 5 to 6 days to finish excavating the 2 ore veins. At first, everyone was secretly laughing when they saw that Yank was very clumsy and used a very primitive way to excavate the ore veins. However, after receiving Ji Tianxing's guidance and cultivating for a day, Yank suddenly showed his prowess. Chao Qingyu, Lin Shui, and the others were dumbfounded. After observing for a while, everyone exclaimed in disbelief and whispered to each other, "Oh my God, how did Yank suddenly become enlightened? He was very clumsy before, but now he has become a mining machine. His efficiency is so amazing. Did you see that? He completed the excavation, refining, purifying, and dividing work alone at a frightening speed. He cultivated for a day and seemed to have become a different person. This must be the young master's guidance. Yes. Yank is not a genius. It must be the young master's guidance that made him so powerful. Yank is a stone, the kind that is stupider than wood. Only a godly person like the young master can create miracles. Since the young master has mastered the magical mining skills, why didn't he do it himself? Instead, he imparted the ultimate skill to Yin Ku and let Yin Ku perform the divine ability? Nonsense, isn't it? White Dragon could not help but roll his eyes. My master is the master, and Yank is the servant. How can a master do the work himself? Besides, my master has put in a lot of effort to cultivate Yank and take the opportunity to teach him. Do you think everyone is so lucky? If you don't believe me, you can try." Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, Blood Dragon, and the others were not convinced when they heard that. Everyone ran to Ji Tianxing eagerly and offered to help him excavate the ore veins. Ji Tianxing looked at them strangely and waved his hand to drive them away. "Why are you here? Why are you here? Go away." However, everyone was thinking about the skills in Ji Tianxing's teachings. They could not be driven away. Ji Tianxing could only tell them the truth. "The skills I taught Yank are the special skills of the rock race. You are not from the rock race. Why are you making a fuss?" Everyone came to a sudden realization and could only leave resentfully. Seeing that everyone had returned to mining, White Dragon laughed gloatingly. "See, I told you. You don't have the luck, do you?" Everyone rolled their eyes at him. Unknowingly, 2 days passed. Yank diligently excavated the ore veins. He honed the earth golden cloud technique in hard work to improve his understanding and strength. Early in the morning, he suddenly stopped mining. He pointed at a purple-red area embedded in the vein and cried out in surprise. "Young master, come and see. The ore in this area is very strange. Not only is it 10 times harder than other ores, but it also contains special divine power." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianxing walked up to the ore. After looking down at it, a gratified smile appeared on his face. "It's finally born. With this purple flame divine stone, this trip was worth it." Chapter 3372. Without a doubt, the purple-red ore in the vein was Ji Tianxing's target, the purple flame divine rock. Of course, the ore was as big as a millstone, and there were impurities and other metal ores in it. After being smelted and purified by Yank, the real purple flame divine rock was only as big as a watermelon. Yank tactfully cut it into a dozen pieces and presented them to Ji Tianxing with both hands. Ji Tianxing put the purple flame divine rock into a spatial ring and thought to himself, "With so many purple flame divine rocks, the purple flame silver strands refined from them will not only be enough to upgrade the Sword of Burial of Heaven, but also have leftovers." Thinking of this, he thought to himself, "After the Sword of Burial of Heaven is upgraded to King Grade, I'll have enough materials left." Then I'll refine another set of king grade armor. Or maybe I can help Yao Yao, Ku, Wushuang, and the others upgrade their origin stones to king grade as well. After all, if I don't add any king grade materials into a natural grade divine weapon, the limit is to reach the monarch grade. While Ji Tianxing was still thinking, Yang stopped mining the vein. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but ask, Yank, why did you stop and look at me? Yank answered without hesitation, Sir, haven't we found the purple flame divine rock you're looking for? Our mission is complete. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Of course, it's better to have more king-grade materials like this. Since there's a large piece of purple flame divine rock in this vein, it's very likely that there's a second one. Don't just stand there, keep mining. Okay. Yank nodded resentfully and could only continue to use the Earth Golden Cloud technique to mine the vein. He didn't know if Ji Tianxing was too lucky or if the heavens were watching over him. After a short 20 hours, Yank had indeed mined another piece of purple-red ore. However, this particular piece of ore was much smaller than the previous one. After smelting and refining, only 5 fist-sized purple flame divine stones were obtained. Even so, Ji Tianxing was satisfied with the outcome. After another half a day, Yank had finally finished mining the entire vein of ore. In Ji Tianxing's interspatial ring, there were more than 10 billion worth of godstones, gems, and metals, as well as 20 purple flame godstones. He looked at Yank and asked, What do you think? You must be tired after mining for so many days, right? Do you want to rest? Yank waved his hand and exclaimed, No need to rest. If I had used the same mining method as before, I would definitely be tired now. But after using the Earth Golden Cloud art for 4 consecutive days, not only did I not feel tired, I felt like I was full of energy and my strength had increased. Young master, this divine ability is indeed extraordinary. The experiences, tricks, and understandings you've imparted to me are enough for me to figure out and digest for a very long time. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a playful smile, Do well. There will be even more exquisite divine abilities in the future. Okay. Yank was full of energy and his heart was filled with anticipation. Unknowingly, his resentment and contempt towards Ji Tianxing had vanished like smoke into thin air. Now, he did not feel that following Ji Tianxing was a disgrace. Instead, he was enjoying it. If Ji Tianxing set him free, he could choose to stay or leave. If it was in the past, he would have chosen to leave without hesitation. But now, he would not hesitate and weigh the pros and cons. He wanted to follow Ji Tianxing and understand the relationship between Ji Tianxing and the Stone Skins. He also wanted to learn more divine abilities from Ji Tianxing. Let's go and see how they are doing. Ji Tianxing saw that Yank was in a daze and called out to him and flew towards Lin Shui and Chao Qingyu. Yank came back to his senses and hurriedly followed. At this moment, Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, and the others were still working hard. Fortunately, the mining of the 2 mineral veins had entered the final stage, and there was not much left. Everyone had gained a lot, and each of them had at least received a few billion worth of resources. Even after working for a few days, they did not feel tired and were still enthusiastic. Under Ji Tianxing's instructions, Yank also joined the mining work and helped everyone mine the mineral veins. As a result, the time taken was greatly reduced. In just 12 hours, the mining of the 2 mineral veins was completed. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and carefully checked the Red Rock Island. After confirming that there were no mineral veins underground and that there were only scattered paragon stones and gemstones on the island, the group left. Swoosh! Swoosh! The group flew across the lava sea and headed towards the depths of the lava sea. Their target was another island 100,000 miles away. According to President Feng Yin, there were 9 reef islands in this area, and all of them contained rich mineral resources. Most importantly, the rumored king-level divine object had also appeared in this area and was likely to be on one of the reef islands. At the same time, in the imperial city of the Golden Dragon Empire, this majestic city with a history of 10,000 years and a radius of 1,000 miles was usually very lively. Although it was late at night, the entire imperial city was brightly lit and filled with people. However, unlike the bustling atmosphere of the city, the imperial palace was heavy and depressing, as if covered by a thick haze. Deep in the imperial palace, in the study of the Golden Dragon Emperor, a tall and burly middle-aged Protoss with a square face, wearing a dark golden dragon robe and a crown, was sitting at the desk, frowning and deep in thought. Even though the study was brightly lit, the middle-aged Protoss, who exuded an air of dignity, exuded an icy aura all over his body. Even the two Imperial guards guarding the door of the study felt cold all over and did not dare to breathe. At this time, the commander of the Imperial Guards, who was as sturdy as an iron tower, stepped into the study room, wearing gilded divine armor. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The governor of the Imperial Army bowed respectfully. The Emperor of the Golden Dragon Empire looked up and asked expressionlessly, "Have you found anything? Is there any news of the Crown Prince and Prince Jean?" The commander bowed and did not dare to stand up. After a moment of silence, he replied in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I have sent more than 100 Imperial Guards and used all the secret agents and intelligence organizations, but I have not been able to find the whereabouts of the Crown Prince and Prince Jean." The Imperial Guards went to the Golden Dragon Abyss and interrogated the people around the abyss. They all said that they did not see the Crown Prince and Prince Jean leave. In addition, the 100 Imperial Guards and Imperial Guards who followed the Crown Prince and Prince Jean also disappeared. The study fell silent. As the Emperor's face darkened, the temperature became colder. His brows were tightly knitted and his eyes were cold. He asked in a cold voice, "So the Crown Prince and Prince Jean have not come out after entering the abyss? Have all of them disappeared after they sent me a message?" The commander could only nod. Yes. The Emperor of the Golden Dragon Empire took a deep breath. His eyes were even colder and filled with killing intent. He gritted his teeth and asked, "So my most loyal brother and most beloved and most outstanding eldest son have all died in the Golden Dragon Abyss?" Chapter 3373. The Golden Dragon Emperor's question made it difficult for the commander to answer, although his rationality told him that he could not answer too directly. Even if he knew that the Crown Prince and Prince Jean were dead, he had to leave some leeway in his words. He had to say that nothing was absolute and that there might still be a glimmer of hope, but the commander understood the Golden Dragon Emperor's personality. He had always been overbearing, direct, and cold. He did not like to feign civility and beat around the bush. If he answered like that, the Emperor would most likely be unhappy and might even take his anger out on him. Thus, the Imperial Army governor braced himself and nodded. "Yes." Bang! The Golden Dragon Emperor's anger exploded. He stood up and smashed the divine jade desk in front of him. The divine jade shards flew everywhere and smashed onto the ground and walls. The governor of the Imperial Army was also hit by more than a dozen pieces of gravel, but his body stood on the spot like a javelin. Not only did he not dare to dodge, he did not even dare to move. The Golden Dragon Emperor was unable to restrain his anger. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His entire body was surrounded by blood-red flames of killing intent. What a Gaia empire! What a wind-hidden society! They are actually so arrogant. Where the Imperial Guards sent to the Gaia Empire, immediately send an order to kill their way into the headquarters of the Wind-Hidden Society. Kill everyone alive. Leave no one alive. Yes. The commander quickly cupped his fists and bowed, indicating that he would do as he was told. But he hesitated and reminded, "But, Your Majesty, the elite forces of the Wind-Hidden Society have not returned to the Gaia Empire. They're still in our country." The Golden Dragon Emperor shouted angrily. "Then send another batch of Imperial Guards to kill the main forces of the Wind-Hidden Society." The governor of the Imperial Army replied, "Yes, sir." After a pause, he carefully asked, "Your Majesty, the culprits who murdered the Crown Prince and Prince Jean are 3 guests of the Wind-Hidden Society. They are suspected to be Divine King experts. I have sent the Imperial Guards to investigate. No one saw them leave the Golden Dragon Abyss. I think they should still be in the Abyss." The Golden Dragon Emperor took a few deep breaths to suppress his anger and killing intent. He gradually regained his calm. He gritted his teeth and said, "No matter who those 3 bastards are or how strong they are, they dared to kill my crown prince and elder brother. That is an unpardonable crime. No matter what method is used, we must capture them, tear them into 1,000 pieces, and burn their bones to ashes." The Imperial Army governor was silent for a moment before he reminded in a low voice, "Your Majesty, I understand your feelings very well. I can't wait to chop those 3 bastards into pieces. However, they were divine kings after all, and within our empire, there are no divine king powerhouses. I'm afraid it'll be hard to contend with them." The Golden Dragon Emperor was still fuming, and he glared at Tang Wulin as he roared, "Bastard! Are you confused? Naturally, there are no divine king powerhouses under my command, but we have the region lord behind us. He is the ruler of the Golden Dragon region. After such a huge incident, 3 god kings actually came to the Golden Dragon region to flaunt their prowess and start massacre. How can the region lord just sit by and watch?" The Imperial Army governor hurriedly nodded and bowed in apology. "Your Majesty is right." This old official was muddle-headed. The Golden Dragon Emperor thought to himself for a moment before issuing an order. "Gather 200 Imperial guards and head to the Golden Dragon Abyss right away. Find those 3 as soon as possible. Don't ask to kill them. Just keep them occupied and don't let them escape. I'll bring another 100 Imperial guards and head to the Golden Dragon Abyss. As for the region lord, I'll personally send him a message jade slip and ask for his help." The Imperial Army governor bowed with a solemn expression. After acknowledging the order, he lowered his head and excused himself. The study returned to silence. Only the Golden Dragon Emperor remained. He took out a special dark golden message jade slip. His heart was heavy, and he choked with sobs as he typed a message into the jade slip. Master, please ask for help. Something bad has happened." 3 foreign divine kings had charged into the Golden Dragon Empire in an aggressive manner and were wantonly massacring the innocent. They learned that a large number of divine lords had gathered in the Golden Dragon Abyss, so they rushed there and slaughtered the innocent. My son and elder brother also led the Imperial Army to explore the Abyss. They couldn't stand the sight of those 3 divine kings wantonly slaughtering the innocent. They wanted to protect the innocent, so they decided to help. Who would have thought that those 3 bastards would be so vicious? They actually killed my son and elder brother, and they even threatened to destroy the Golden Dragon Empire. Master, you have to uphold justice for your disciple. The Golden Dragon domain is your territory. You are the absolute overlord. Those 3 bastards are wantonly slaughtering the innocent in the Golden Dragon domain. You can't let them go." The Golden Dragon Emperor, who had been so domineering and cold a moment ago, pretended to be weeping and crying when he sent a message to the region lord. If anyone else saw this, they would have been flabbergasted. The Golden Dragon domain, in a certain paradise, in the sky that stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles, the sea of clouds was as white as a flat land. A gigantic, dazzling, and magnificent divine palace stood in the middle of the sea of clouds. At this moment, in a garden deep within the divine palace, a handsome young man in a silver robe with starry patterns sat under the green parasol sacred tree. He leaned against a beautiful woman in a palace dress and sipped wine from a jug. This young man was a warrior blood god. He looked to be in his 30s, and he had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. He was extraordinarily handsome. However, there was a hint of arrogance and evil in his long, narrow eyes, and his aura was also slightly gloomy. There was an old saying that said, "One's face is born from one's heart." This handsome young man was definitely not a kind person. As for the beautiful woman in the palace dress, she looked to be about the same age as the silver-robed young man, but she was actually 2,000 years older. At her age, no matter how beautiful she would not be as dazzling and stunning as a young woman. She was like a wine that had aged for many years. She had a unique flavor that new wine could not match. At the very least, the silver-robed young man was unable to extricate himself from his love and longing for her. The two of them were drinking and enjoying themselves under the sacred tree. Suddenly, a streak of golden light flew out of the sea of clouds and landed in the silver-robed young man's hand. The silver-robed young man put down his jug of wine and held the golden jade slip in his hand. His spiritual sense entered it to read the message. A moment later, he suddenly frowned and sneered. The beautiful woman in the palace dress raised her eyebrows and asked, "Longer, who sent you a message? What happened?" The silver-robed young man handed her the communication jade slip and sneered. "How many people in the Golden Dragon realm can send me a message? It's that useless disciple of mine who caused trouble again. He wants me to avenge him." The beautiful woman in the palace dress placed the communication jade slip on the stone table and said with a faint smile, "I don't want to read the jade slip. Just tell me the message." The silver-robed young man smiled and said, 3 foreign god kings broke into the Golden Dragon Empire and killed the young emperor's eldest son and brother in the Golden Dragon Abyss. Chapter 3374. What? 3 foreign godly kings barged into the Golden Dragon Empire? Longer, such a big thing happened. How can you still laugh? The beauty in palace attire was obviously shocked as she hurriedly propped herself up to sit. The silver-robed youth patted her hand, indicating that she didn't need to panic. "Don't worry, it's just 3 low-level godly kings with shallow foundations. Didn't many godly monarchs run into the abyss to search for treasures recently? Little Crown Prince and War Prince also brought a large group of guards and ran into the abyss to act tyrannically. I reckon that those 2 fellows ran amok again. That's why they provoked 3 foreign godly kings who were also searching for treasures. In the end, Little Crown Prince and War Prince fought fiercely with the other party. After fighting for 2 hours, they were all killed. The emperor's son and brother all died, but he didn't have the ability to take revenge, so he could only complain tearfully to me, his master, and beg me to take revenge for him." The originally complicated matter, after the silver-robed youth said this, it became simple and clear. The beauty in palace attire roughly understood the cause of the matter and couldn't help but frown as she asked, "How many guards did Little Crown Prince and War Prince bring?" "About 100. The silver-robed youth answered without hesitation. The beauty in palace attire frowned as she analyzed. Both sides fought fiercely. 3 godly kings against 100 godly monarchs. And in the lava sea, they actually fought for 2 hours? From the looks of it, those 3 godly kings' strength is sloppy and ordinary, probably not much stronger than me." The silver-robed youth instantly grinned evilly and stretched out his hand to scratch her nose as he teased. "In my heart, although Master's wife is only in the 3rd-degree realm, she's comparable to a middle-level godly king. At certain times, Master's wife is even more powerful than me and can tightly suppress me." "Oomph. Annoying." The beauty in palace attire frowned and stretched out her hand to slap the silver-robed youth's hand away as she angrily spat. "I'm talking business with you. Don't talk about such frivolous things. Also, how many times have I told you? Don't call me Master's wife. You have to call me Lian. Every time I hear the words Master's wife, I always think of your master, that dead ghost." The silver-robed youth's smile became even more sinister. "Tiske. Master's wife is really sentimental. Master has already passed away for 12,000 years, and you actually still think of him. Unlike an unfilial disciple like me, who has long forgotten what he looks like. But then again, although the 2 of us sent him to the Western Paradise, this disciple of mine has always done his best to take care of Master's wife for him. I believe that the old man will definitely be able to rest in peace. Ha ha ha." The beautiful woman waved her hand and frowned. "Longer, this is our biggest secret. We must keep it to ourselves and never let a 3rd person know. Besides, it's been more than 10,000 years, so don't bring it up so often." "All right, we've digressed from the topic. Continue to talk about your disciple. Although that Little Crown Prince and the War Prince had always been bossy and domineering, used to being arrogant and overbearing. It was time for them to suffer some losses and learn a lesson. But it was different this time. They had all been killed, and they had also learned their lesson. After all, The Golden Dragon region is your territory. 3 foreign godly kings are going on a killing spree here. They really don't care about you at all. No matter what, you have to personally make a trip and deal with those 3 god kings. Otherwise, your reputation will be tarnished when the news spreads. The silver-robed young man nodded and said seriously, "Of course. How can I allow others to behave atrociously in this king's territory? However, you have to go together with me. We've been cooped up in this divine palace and haven't gone out for a long time." The beautiful woman in palace attire stood up and pulled his arm. She nodded with a faint smile and said, "All right, then I'll make a trip with you. The 2 of us, husband and wife, will personally meet those 3 god kings. Anyway, I've been bored for 100 years. To be able to exchange blows with god king powerhouses again, it'll also be good to test the results of my close seclusion these 100 years." The silver-robed young man did not say anything else. Waving his hand, he fired out a streak of white light, condensing a spatial transmission portal in front of him. The 2 people stepped into the transmission portal and disappeared with a flash of white light. For a full 10 days, Ji Tianxing and the rest have been exploring the magma sea all along. Within these 10 days, they explored 6 reef islands one after another, traveling a distance of 500,000 miles. The area and resource reserves of the 6 reef islands were all more or less the same as Red Rock Island. On each reef island, a dazzling 5-colored divine light appeared, shining with a luster of metals and gems. On 4 of the reef islands, there were more or less mineral veins. Such rich mineral resources naturally attracted countless Sir God powerhouses and caused many factions to fight over them. However, the fighting was something that happened not long ago. Now, the 6 reef islands had owners and were occupied by several powerful factions. Ji Tianxing led Yank, Chao Qingyu, Lin Shui, and the rest to search each reef island one by one. If there were only Sir God-level mineral veins, gems, and materials on the reef islands, Ji Tianxing would not be interested. After he searched the reef islands, he would quickly leave and rush to the next reef island. The faction that occupied the reef islands also had a false alarm. If he discovered the aura of a king-level divine object or resources on any reef island, he would occupy the reef island and use all his strength to excavate the king-level divine object. Although the faction that occupied the reef islands was very angry and unwilling to accept the outcome, many Sir God powerhouses even attacked Ji, Tianxing, and the rest. However, the end result was the same. Yank and Chao Qingyu took action and easily defeated all the Sir God powerhouses. After a great battle and massacre, the faction that occupied the reef islands was intimidated and obediently retreated. After 10 days, Ji Tianxing and the rest searched the 6 islands and gained a lot. 4 of the reef islands were very ordinary and only had Sir God-level resources and materials. Ji Tianxing let them go. On the other 2 islands, there were king-level divine objects and materials, but they were all occupied by Ji Tianxing. The group stayed on each island for 4 days and excavated all the valuable mineral veins and found king-level divine objects before leaving. Now, Ji Tianxing, like everyone else, had gained a lot. Ji Tianxing obtained a 7-treasure fire lotus. It was a king-level alchemy material and could be used to refine more than a dozen king-level divine elixirs. There was also a 7-fire divine gold that had grown for more than 30,000 years. It was also an excellent material for refining king-level divine weapons. As such, Ji Tianxing had already collected several king-level materials and could reforge the Sword of Burial of Heaven at any time to upgrade it to a king-level divine weapon. Chao Qingyu, Yank, Lin Shui, Bai Long, and the rest had also gained a lot. The group excavated 2 reef islands and excavated 5 mineral veins, obtaining more than $80 billion worth of cultivation resources. Even after everyone distributed the resources, each of them would still obtain resources worth a few $1 billion. With such a rich harvest, the group was full of anticipation for the remaining 3 reef islands. After all, the 3 islands were deeper in the lava sea. The mineral reserves would definitely be richer. Chapter 3375. Just as Ji, Tianxing, and the others were flying towards the reef island in front of them in a formidable manner. In the depths of the lava sea, 200,000 miles away from them, a divine light suddenly shot up into the sky. The multicolored divine light was especially dazzling, and it also flashed with a dense array of law divine runes. Even from 200,000 miles away, everyone could vaguely feel an extremely powerful fluctuation of divine power. Seeing this, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then they were pleasantly surprised. Is it a vision of heaven and earth? No, it's not a vision of heaven and earth, but the divine light of a king-level divine object. Great. After more than a month, a king-level divine object has appeared again? Looks like we're destined to make a fortune in this operation. As long as a king-level divine object appears, it's ours. No one can compete with us for it. Lin Shui, Chao Qingyu, Lan and the others were all excited and cheering. Suddenly, Bai Long pointed at the lava sea in front of them and whispered, "Everyone look! Many people have discovered the light of the divine object and are swarming over." Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and saw many Sir Gods rushing to the place where the king-level divine object had appeared at their fastest speed. The Sir Gods were in groups, and they were all moving in groups of dozens. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the others observed carefully for a moment and realized that the dozens of Sir Gods belonged to two different forces and were divided into two groups. "Everyone, don't waste time. Let's hurry over. Don't let those people beat us to it," Chao Qingyu whispered and urged everyone to speed up. However, at this moment, dozens of divine lights lit up above the magma sea in all directions. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Every divine light had at least 3 to 5 Sir Gods, and they were all rushing toward the group. Everyone looked around and realized that there were more than 50 balls of divine light, forming a huge encirclement that surrounded them. Of course, as the divine lights sped over, the encirclement was rapidly shrinking. Seeing this, everyone could only stop moving forward. They all took out their divine weapons and looked around cautiously. Soon, the dozens of divine lights arrived before them and stopped 100 miles away from them. After the divine light faded, a total of 200 Sir Gods appeared. These Sir Gods were all wearing standard silver armor and helmets that covered their faces. Only their eyes were exposed, and their faces could not be seen. Every one of them was holding a sword or a spear. They were staring at Ji, Tianxing, and the others with murderous intent. They were ready to attack. The atmosphere in the field immediately became tense. Chao Qingyu, Xuelin, Bai Long, and the others all frowned, feeling the pressure. After all, the surrounding 200 divine lords, their strengths were all 4th-level divine lord realm and above. Among them, there were over 160 middle-level divine lords, over 30 high-level divine lords, and 2 peak divine lords. They were 2 tall and burly God clan warriors in golden armor. Their auras were ferocious. Furthermore, it was obvious that these Sir Gods were well-trained and had great teamwork. Their combined offensive strength far exceeded that of 200 ordinary divine lords. The other party was brimming with killing intent. It was obvious that they had come prepared. This was going to be a fierce battle. Ji Tianxing's expression did not change. He was still calm. He looked around calmly and reminded the others, "These are the Imperial Guards of the Golden Dragon Empire. They are here to avenge their crown prince and war prince." The others immediately understood and began to discuss. No wonder their target was so clear. They were hiding in the surroundings and then surrounded us. I was wondering why they were all wearing the same armor. Even the insignia on their collars and sleeves are the same. I knew that the Golden Dragon Empire would not let this go. I didn't expect them to come so quickly. Anyway, we should have left this place earlier. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult now. Yes, if the Golden Dragon Empire wants to take revenge, they will definitely send more Imperial Guards. Numerous Divine Lord Realm powerhouses will definitely surge over in an endless stream. All right, don't worry. Look at how calm the young master is. What do we have to be afraid of? At first, everyone's expression and mood were very grave. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was calm, they were relieved. At this moment, the two peaked Sir Gods in golden armor stepped out of the crowd. They stared coldly at the crowd and spoke. Boy, before coming to the Golden Dragon Abyss, I was worried that you would escape. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant that you are still in the Abyss. Since you've already recognized who we are, then you should know why we're here. Stop talking nonsense. Pay with your lives for the Crown Prince and War Prince. Of course, if you know what's good for you, you will obediently surrender. Perhaps you can die in a dignified manner. The two peaked Sir Gods in golden armor were the governor and deputy governor of the Imperial Guards. They were very powerful and had high status. They knew that Ji, Tianxing, Yank, and Chao Qingyu were all Sir Gods. They also saw Lin Shui, Bai Long, and Shui Huan. They were all Sir Gods. However, they were not worried or timid at all. They were full of confidence. After all, they had an absolute advantage in numbers. 200 well-trained and well-coordinated Imperial Guards were sufficient to contend against 3 great divine king experts. Ji Tianxing glanced at the two governors and said indifferently, I knew you would come for revenge, but I can't do anything about it, so I won't leave. You want to avenge War Prince? Just a few of you are far from enough. Tell the others to come out. Ji Tianxing had expected that the Golden Dragon Empire would send more than 200 experts. Otherwise, the Golden Dragon Empire would be overconfident and underestimating him, the Divine King. As expected, the governor frowned and sneered. You're not stupid. You guessed that we have a large number of reinforcements. However, the 200 Imperial Guards under my command are enough to deal with you. This is the territory of the Golden Dragon Empire. As long as His Majesty gives the order, all the Sir Gods will kill you. Therefore, you should surrender and admit your mistakes. Don't be stubborn. The governor led the 200 Imperial Guards to the Golden Dragon Abyss first. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the 100 Imperial Guards follow behind. His goal was not to kill Ji Tianxing and the others, but to delay them as much as possible. Therefore, although the 200 Imperial Guards appear to be aggressive, they did not want to start a fight immediately. Seeing that Ji Tianxing and the others were calm and not in a hurry to escape or start a fight, the governor was not in a hurry either. He was happy to stall for time. Moreover, he kept repeating and emphasizing that this was the Golden Dragon Empire. Ji Tianxing and the others would be the enemy of the entire empire and would not be able to move an inch. His goal was to persuade Ji Tianxing and the others to surrender without fighting. That way, he would be able to make a great contribution without bloodshed. It would be perfect. Chapter 3376. However, in just a few words, Ji Tianxing had seen through the thoughts of the Imperial Army's governor. Ji Tianxing looked towards the northwest. There was nothing unusual within the range of 10,000 miles. He searched another 40,000 miles with his divine sense and found no other divine emperors. Therefore, he sneered at the Imperial Army governor and asked, Haha, are you trying to fool me? The Golden Dragon Emperor and a large group of divine emperors will come to your aid. But not now. They won't be here anytime soon, right? Even if you have 200 divine emperors, you won't be able to kill us. So, you want to stall for time and wait for the Golden Dragon Emperor to come to your aid, right? Hearing that, the governor and the vice commander looked at each other in shock. Both of them had the same thought in their minds. Is this guy a monster? How can he know what we're thinking? Their faces were a bit pale. They were about to refute or change the topic. Then, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and gave the order to attack. Kill them. Let's finish this quickly. He knew that once the Golden Dragon Empire started to take revenge, it would be endless. It wouldn't be a problem to break out of the encirclement of the Imperial Guards. But if he did that, the Imperial Guards would definitely chase after him and delay his search for the king-level divine object. The best way was to kill all the Imperial Guards. If he could find the king-level divine object before the Golden Dragon Emperor and his reinforcements arrived, he could leave the Golden Dragon Abyss without regrets. Following Ji Tianxing's order, Yin Ku and Chao Qingyu charged out and unleashed their ultimate techniques and Ubijna to launch a fierce attack on the Imperial Army. Lin Shui, Shui Huan, Bai Long, and Yefeyun also waved their weapons and performed their secret divine skills. Swish, swish, swish. Swish, 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 swish. All of a sudden, the colorful brilliance of divine spells shrouded the area within a radius of 200 miles. Sword lights and saber lights, as well as all kinds of bizarre divine spells, poured down like a torrential flood. Under such circumstances, even if the Imperial Army governor didn't want to start a war and wanted to stall for time, there was nothing he could do. There was almost no need for him to give the order. The 200 Imperial Army soldiers brandished their Kenshin weapons and launched a coordinated counterattack. Almost all of them used the same divine ability, unleashing tens of thousands of five-colored light blades that slashed toward Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu, and the others. The many Imperial Army soldiers worked together to cast the spell. Their coordination was excellent, causing the power of the spell to multiply. Pung pung pung. Rumble. The divine spells cast by both sides collided in the sky with a deafening boom. Countless saber and sword auras, as well as divine arts, were shattered by the collision. Billions of divine light shards burst out and scattered in the sea of lava. A destructive five-colored shockwave spread out in all directions, sweeping through an area of 10,000 miles. Within this region, the sea of magma had been shaken to the point of boiling. Surging waves of fire surged into the sky, releasing seven-colored divine flames that blotted out the sky. Instantly, many Imperial Army soldiers touched the seven-colored divine fire. Their armors were burned until they twisted and large holes appeared. At least 30 Imperial Army soldiers were burned by the seven-colored divine fire. They screamed in pain and had to retreat from the battle. Of course, Lin Shui, Bai Long, Shui Huan, and the others were also in danger. They were threatened by the seven-colored divine fire. Luckily, Ji Tianxing acted in time. He used the swallowing divine power and swallowed the seven-colored divine fire around them. Only Yank and Chao Qingyu weren't affected by the seven-colored divine fire. They fought bravely. The two sides had only fought for a few seconds, but more than a dozen Imperial Army soldiers had been killed by Yank and Chao Qingyu. Even though Lin Shui and God Emperor Shui Huan used all their ultimate moves, the Imperial Army soldiers weren't strong enough. However, the strength of the Imperial Guards was not to be underestimated, and they worked together to cast spells to resist. No matter how hard Lin Shui and God Emperor Shui Huan attacked, they couldn't hurt the Imperial Army soldiers. Instead, they themselves were in a very dangerous situation. Their lives could be in danger at any time. But Ji Tianxing suppressed his worry and didn't ask them to hide in the divine ship. He knew that if they hid and cultivated in seclusion, it would be very difficult for them to increase their strength. Only through life and death battles could they strengthen their foundation of the divine path and increase their combat strength. Time passed quickly as they fought fiercely. Deafening explosions and dazzling rays of divine light caused everything within a radius of 3,000 miles to be in chaos. A full quarter of an hour had passed, and the situation of the battle had undergone subtle changes. At the beginning, Yank and Chao Qingyu fought bravely and achieved great results. The two of them severely injured more than 30 Imperial Army soldiers and killed more than 20. But until now, the number of Imperial Army soldiers had only increased by a dozen. The two of them seemed to be in a quagmire and became very slow. The governor and deputy governor of the Imperial Army had led more than 90 Imperial Army soldiers to surround the two of them. The two of them couldn't use any of their strength. No matter how powerful their divine powers were, they were neutralized by the other party as if they were hitting cotton. As for Lin Shui, God Emperor Shui Huan, God Emperor Bai Long, and the others, they were in an even worse situation. More than 30 Imperial Army soldiers had formed a battle formation and attacked them together. The divine abilities and killer moves they used were basically all blocked by the Imperial Army. Instead, the siege of the Imperial Army soldiers caused them great trouble and danger. Now, not only were Nie Feiyun and left emissary Jin injured, but Lin Shui and God Emperor Bai Long were also injured. The battle had reached a stalemate. Originally, Ji Tianxing had predicted that he would be able to finish the battle within an hour. But looking at the current situation, the battle might not end even after another 4 hours. If the battle continued, Lin Shui, God Emperor by long, and the others would be more seriously injured. The slightest carelessness could lead to serious consequences. They would be seriously injured, and even their foundation of the divine path would be affected. Moreover, Yank and Chao Qingyu didn't have enough battle experience. When faced with the siege of a large number of Sir Gods and the other party's battle formation, they made some mistakes. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianxing also changed his attitude. He no longer watched with folded arms like before. He asked Chao Qingyu to take out the divine warship to cover Lin Shui, God Emperor by long, and the others. They all retreated to the divine warship to heal and rest. Soon, only he, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were left on the battlefield. They were besieged by more than 120 Imperial Army soldiers. Only godly king experts like them could ignore the threat of the seven-color divine fire and withstand the joint attack of so many Sir Gods. Ji Tianxing channeled his energy and cast spells as he instructed Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan. Although you are all godly kings and have cultivated for more than 10,000 years, you still don't have enough battle experience. However, your combat experience is still lacking, especially when it comes to large-scale group battles. In a situation where the other party has the advantage of numbers and has formed a battle formation, you can't just charge and retreat blindly. At this time, you have to combine formation and battle. Chapter 33:77. In the eyes of the world, a godly king was a supreme expert. They were already at the peak of the godly way. Their comprehension of the godly way laws and the use of various divine powers had reached the acme of perfection. Logically speaking, a godly king expert's combat experience and foundation of the godly way were extremely solid. However, that was only relative to those below the godly king realm. In front of Ji Tianxing, lower godly kings like Lan, and Chao Qingyu were nothing. Even a middle godly king like Yank was clumsy. There were too many areas that he needed to learn and improve on. When the three of them heard his guidance, their bodies shook. Then they were enlightened. At this moment, Ji Tianxing's divine power had reached its peak. He released his ultimate killer move. Watch carefully. Just like this. Ji Tianxing shouted. He held the sword of Burial of Heaven in his right hand and slashed at the battle formation in front of him with all his might. Heavenly Dragon Slash. The sword of Burial of Heaven gave off boundless golden light. It slashed out a dazzling dragon-shaped sword that was 10,000 feet long. The golden sword was like a divine dragon. It let out a dragon roar that tore through the sky. It slashed down at the Imperial Army. The battle formation was formed by more than 30 Imperial Army members. It was in the shape of a disc and occupied a radius of 50 miles. Seeing the dragon-shaped sword descending from the sky, everyone looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Their expressions were extremely grave. Without any orders, they all unleashed their full strength in unison. They operated the battle formation to block the attack of the giant sword and tried their best to neutralize the unparalleled power of the giant sword. Kaboom! In the next moment, the gigantic dragon-shaped sword that could split heaven and earth slashed down fiercely, producing a deafening sound. The dazzling golden light drowned more than 30 Imperial Army members. The battle formation that they formed together and the shield that they released were all split in half by the giant sword. The shield shattered, and the sky was filled with fragments of divine light. The battle formation was also split in half. It was destroyed on the spot. Another 18 Imperial Army members were directly killed by the dragon-shaped sword. Not only were their bodies smashed to pieces, but their godheads were also shattered. With one strike, a battle formation was destroyed, and the Imperial Army suffered grievous casualties. Yin Ku, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were all dazzled by the scene, their faces filled with astonishment. Chao Qingyu and Lan were deep in thought. They roughly understood what Ji Tianxing meant and vaguely found a way to break the spell. Only Yank frowned and pondered. He asked in confusion, "Young master, you're using brute force to destroy the enemy's battle formation. I used the same method before, so why didn't I break their battle formation? Could it be that my divine ability isn't powerful enough?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a chuckle, "I've long said that your talent and perception are indeed a bit lacking. Could it be that you didn't notice that my sword technique from before didn't just contain over 100 types of divine Tao laws? It even contained the energy of the formation Tao? Moreover, the target of this sword technique was very important. Since the other party had made it clear that they were going all out to defend, you couldn't attack the weak points of the battle formation. This was because the other party would definitely use the power of the battle formation to block your attack and disperse the power. Only by attacking the strongest point of the battle formation, which the other party couldn't disperse or divert the power, could you break the enemy in one strike." After pausing for a moment, he continued to explain, "Of course, this effect can only be achieved if the power of your attack exceeds the strongest defense of the battle formation. If you can't do that, then find the weak points and flaws of the battle formation in the battle. Make use of diversionary tactics and sneak attacks to find a way to break the flaws of the battle formation. After creating a gap in the battle formation, you can gradually expand the results of the battle and destroy the entire battle formation." Ji Tianxing explained it so clearly that Yank naturally understood. Only then did he reveal a look of realization. "I see. Although I'm the lord of a region and have killed countless Sir Gods, I've never fought in a battle like this before. But I have never fought such a battle where I had to face more than 100 divine lords alone. Now that I've listened to your guidance, I've been enlightened." Ji Tianxing pointed at the battle formation formed by over 90 Imperial Guards in the distance and said with a playful smile, "Since you've learned it, let's practice it." Air. Yang's face instantly revealed a difficult expression. He smiled bitterly and said, "Master, isn't this too difficult for me?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "What are you afraid of? You're a middle divine king. Your skin is rough and your flesh is thick. Even if you get injured, it won't be fatal." Yang could only brace himself and nodded, saying, "All right, then I'll try my best." After saying that, he turned and charged towards the battle formation. He used his strongest abhijna with all his strength and attacked the strongest point of the battle formation. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but frown and sigh. Chao Qingyu and Lan looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. The result was obvious. Yang's abhijna with all his strength couldn't break through the defense of the battle formation. It was dissolved in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, the 2 Imperial Guards and over 90 Imperial Guards took advantage of the situation to launch a counterattack and sent Yank flying back. Fortunately, his defense was strong and he only suffered some minor injuries. It wasn't a big deal. When he returned to Ji Tianxing, he scratched his head awkwardly and smiled embarrassedly. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said in a low voice, "The opponent is a battle formation formed by over 100 Sir Gods. Even I can't break through with brute force, let alone you. I can only find the weakness and flaw first. I'll show you again. Watch carefully." After saying that, Ji Tianxing held the sword of Burial of Heaven and rushed to the front of the battle formation in a flash. He was covered in a layer of dark golden divine light. He waved the sword of Burial of Heaven and rushed into the battle formation. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He dashed left and right, constantly flashing and shooting out tens of thousands of sword auras. His figure was erratic, sometimes to the east and sometimes to the west. He moved freely in the battle formation and no one could stop him. The Imperial Guards couldn't catch his movements or predict his target. They could only be led by the nose. In a short while, over a dozen Imperial Guards were killed by Ji Tianxing. The remaining 80 Imperial Guards were all restrained by Ji Tianxing. They were in a mess and flaws appeared in the battle formation. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianxing attacked decisively the moment the opening appeared. He teleported to the flaw in the battle formation and instantly unleashed his strongest power. He swung the sword of Burial of Heaven. Swish! Rising sword of life. A dark golden sword aura that was 1,000 feet long swept out like a crescent moon. It was hazy and elegant and contained an ethereal sword will. The sword seemed slow, but it was actually fast. It was impossible to guard against it. Even though the Imperial Guards realized something was wrong and rushed over to stop it, it was too late. Boom! With a muffled explosion, 6 Imperial guards were swept up by the sword aura and cut in half. A gap was torn open in the originally unbreakable battle formation. Even though this gap wasn't large, Ji Tianxing immediately swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven and used 3 supreme sword techniques in a row. Pung, 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 pung. Another dozen Imperial army soldiers were sent flying and killed by the Heaven Burial's sword. The gap in the battle formation instantly widened several times and could no longer be closed. Yank was extremely excited by this sight. He couldn't help but shout, "Young master is mighty." Chapter 33:78. As the ruler of a region, Yank had always been arrogant and reserved. Not to mention worshipping someone, even if he had to admit that someone was stronger than him, it was still a very difficult thing. However, at this moment, he was very emotional and felt admiration for Ji Tianxing. This was because he could tell that Ji Tianxing was sincere in teaching him. He wanted to teach him more battle experience and techniques. Even though the battle formation formed by the 2 Imperial Army governors and more than 90 Imperial Army soldiers was very strong, it was still not enough. Even if Yang tried his best, he would not be able to break it. But Ji Tianxing managed to do it. He used the second method that he had mentioned, which was to combine the power of array formation with his ultimate skill to break the flaws in the Imperial Army's battle formation and gradually expand the flaws. As a result, the Imperial Army's battle formation was torn apart and was about to fall apart. At the same time, Chao Qingyu and Lan are rushed over. The couple unleashed their strongest strength and ultimate skill as they bravely charged into the gaps in the battle formation and slaughtered the panicked Imperial Army soldiers. The result was undeniable. The gaps in the Imperial Army's battle formation were widened again. In a short span of 10 breaths, Ji Tianxing forcefully broke open 2 more gaps. As Yang came back to his senses and fiercely joined the battle, the Imperial Army's battle formation was torn apart and quickly collapsed. A complete battle formation was divided into several areas that were not connected to each other and could not take care of the front and back. As a result, the battle formation was broken, and the Imperial Army soldiers had lost the protection of the battle formation and could no longer work together to resist the enemy. Their battle strength was greatly reduced. Faced with the fierce attacks of Ji Tianxing and the other 3, the Imperial Army soldiers were completely unable to resist and were beaten back repeatedly. They suffered heavy casualties. Even with the Imperial Army governor and deputy governor leading a few high-level divine lords to reinforce them, they could not change the situation. Another 15 minutes passed, and the battle came to an end. Of the 90 Imperial Army soldiers, only 20 were left. A total of 70 Imperial Army soldiers were killed on the spot. Half of them were killed by Ji Tianxing's sword. Yank and Chao Qingyu killed a lot of them, while Lan killed a lot of them. Such an outcome struck fear into the hearts of the 2 governors and more than 20 Imperial guards. Everyone no longer had the will to fight, and it was difficult for them to continue. They could only fight as they retreated, fleeing towards the entrance of the abyss. Even though the 2 governors and a few high-rank god lords covered the retreat of the surviving guards, they were still able to escape. However, Ji Tianxing and the other 3 pursued relentlessly. After chasing them for 10,000 li, they killed another dozen or so Imperial Guardsmen. Among them were a few high divine lords and vice-governors. Only the Imperial Army governor and 10 Imperial Army soldiers were still alive, but they were also covered in wounds and covered in blood. Everyone was stopped by Ji Tianxing and the others. They no longer had the strength to escape. Everyone's heart was filled with despair, as if they had seen the arrival of death. It's all over. You can all die in peace. The Golden Dragon Emperor won't be able to save you in time. Ji Tianxing said indifferently as he looked coldly at the Imperial Army governor. As soon as he finished speaking, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan waved their divine weapons and used their powerful divine abilities to attack the Imperial Army governor and the others. The Imperial Army governor and the 10 Imperial Army soldiers were dejected. They knew that they were going to die, so they wanted to self-destruct. They knew that even if they self-destructed, they wouldn't be able to kill Ji Tianxing and the others. However, they could rest in peace now that they had caused trouble and serious injuries to Ji, Tianxing, and the others. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly sounded above the lava sea not far away. "How dare you, thief!" As the powerful and domineering male voice sounded, the Imperial Army governor and the 10 Imperial Army soldiers trembled in surprise. Even their dim and lifeless eyes regained their brightness, reigniting the hope of survival. This was because they were all too familiar with that voice. It was the Golden Dragon Emperor's voice. His Majesty had finally arrived to save them. Ji, Tianxing, Yank, and the others naturally heard the Golden Dragon Emperor's voice. However, Yank and the others didn't hesitate at all. They even sped up their casting speed and increased the power of their divine abilities. Boom, 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 boom. With a dull explosion, a dazzling divine light, and a powerful divine skill struck the Imperial Army governor and the 10 Imperial Army soldiers. Their figures were drowned, and their surprised expressions froze. In the dazzling light of the divine arts, blood and flesh splattered, and screams rang out. The 10 Imperial Army soldiers were killed on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere, and dozens of Godhead fragments scattered. Even the Imperial Army governor's divine body was destroyed. His entire body was split into several pieces, and only his Godhead escaped. Whoosh! His Godhead streaked across the sky like lightning, exploding with the fastest speed possible as he fled toward the Golden Dragon Emperor. Thousands of miles away, a dazzling divine light enveloped many figures. It was the Golden Dragon Emperor and hundreds of Imperial Army soldiers. They were also rushing over as fast as they could. The Imperial Army governor believed that as long as his Godhead escaped to the Golden Dragon Emperor, he would be safe. However, Ji, Tianxing intercepted at this moment. He swung his sword and slashed out 9 golden sword lights. Swish, swish, swish. The 9 sword auras fanned out and enveloped the Imperial Army governor's Godhead, making it impossible for him to escape. He had just seen the hope of survival, but he immediately fell into despair. The Golden Dragon Emperor in the distance was also furious when he saw this scene. He roared murderously, "You bastard, you're courting death." However, no matter how angry the Golden Dragon Emperor was, it was useless. The Imperial Army governor's fate was already sealed. He was one step too late. Crack! With a crisp sound, his Godhead was hit by the sword auras, and dozens of fragments burst out. The Imperial Army governor, who was a peak divine lord, was also killed by Ji Tianxing with one strike. He and the 200 Imperial Army soldiers under his command were all annihilated. The Golden Dragon Emperor saw it with his own eyes. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was formed by extreme anger and murderous intent. After the battle, Ji Tianxing put away the sword of burial of heaven and held it behind his back. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor and the others calmly. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan also held divine weapons and stood behind Ji Tianxing, waiting for the Golden Dragon Emperor to arrive. Swish! After a few seconds, the Golden Dragon Emperor and hundreds of Imperial Army soldiers finally arrived. They stopped 100 miles away from Ji Tianxing and formed a battle formation above the lava sea. Then, Ji Tianxing and the others saw the Golden Dragon Emperor's face clearly. Of course, in addition to the hundreds of Imperial Army soldiers, the Golden Dragon Emperor was also accompanied by a peak divine lord. It was an elder in a black robe with dragon patterns. His hair and beard were white, but his eyes were bright and full of vigor. He exuded a gloomy and cold aura. This elder followed behind the Golden Dragon Emperor. He wore an ancient crown on his head and held a scepter that symbolized divine authority. He also carried a broadsword that was as wide as a bench on his back. Judging from his appearance, he should be the Golden Dragon Empire's Grand Master or High Priest. Chapter 3379. Of course, Ji Tianxing didn't care how many Imperial guards the Golden Dragon Emperor had brought with him or who the old man beside him was. He scanned the crowd with his divine sense, but he didn't sense any divine king's aura. Naturally, he stared at the Golden Dragon Emperor and raised an eyebrow. The ruler of the Golden Dragon region didn't come? What's the point of you and 100 Imperial guards coming? The Golden Dragon Emperor's brows furrowed tightly upon hearing this, and he roared, "You damned arrogant brat! You're far too arrogant. You killed my son and brother first, and now you've slaughtered 200 Imperial guards. Such a heinous crime. Your viciousness and cruelty really make one's hair stand on end. Tell me, how should I punish and torture you to appease my hatred?" The Golden Dragon Emperor's anger and hatred had reached its limit. Even if he cut Ji Tianxing into 8 pieces and split him into 5 clones, he still wouldn't be able to appease his hatred. Perhaps only cutting Ji Tianxing into 1,000 pieces and burning his bones to ashes would be able to appease his hatred. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a cold smile. "If that's all you've brought, you'll be buried here too, let alone avenging your son and brother. Revenge breeds revenge. When will it ever end? Leave. Don't make any more unnecessary sacrifices." Even though the Golden Dragon Emperor hated him to the core, he didn't hate him. Whether he killed him or not depended on the Golden Dragon Emperor's attitude. Ji Tianxing was still kind and didn't want to kill again. Unfortunately, the Golden Dragon Emperor didn't appreciate his kindness at all. He was stunned for a moment, then laughed mockingly. "Haha, did I hear wrongly? Are you trying to make peace with me? You must have exhausted all of your divine power in the previous battle, and you must have been seriously injured, right? You don't have the strength to fight against my 100 Imperial guards. You're already scared. Unfortunately, it's too late for you to beg for mercy. I swore before I came here that I would cut you into 1,000 pieces no matter what. Only then can I appease the souls of the Crown Prince and the War Prince." The Golden Dragon Emperor roared with a ferocious expression. He was very pleased with himself, and killing intent swirled around his body. The black-robed elder and the 100 Imperial army soldiers all sneered, their eyes cold and sharp. Seeing this, Yank couldn't help but sneer and ask, "Did that Golden Dragon Emperor misunderstand something? Too naive?" Chao Qingyu couldn't help but nod and say, "This kind of person is very self-confident, arrogant, and overbearing. Their way of thinking is different from ordinary people, and it's hard to change it in a short time." The young master was merciful and intended to spare their lives. Unexpectedly, his first reaction was that we were too weak to fight and wanted to beg for mercy. Ridiculous. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan looked at the Gold Dragon Emperor with pity in their eyes. However, the Golden Dragon Emperor was completely oblivious to this and gave the black-robed elder a meaningful glance. The black-robed old man understood tacitly and immediately waved his hand to issue an order. "Surround them. Don't let them escape." The 100 fully armed Imperial Army soldiers immediately spread out and formed an encirclement with a radius of 100 miles. Everyone was holding swords and spears, and some were even holding crossbows, aiming at Ji Tianxing and the others. Now that the encirclement had been formed, the Golden Dragon Emperor felt even more confident. He glared at Ji Tianxing and shouted in a dignified voice, "Kid, you can't escape now. Even if you have wings, I'll give you a chance. As long as you kneel and beg for mercy and seal your cultivation, I'll give you a dignified death. In fact, I'll only kill you to avenge the Crown Prince and the War Prince. As for your 3 companions, I'll spare their lives." Although he said so, it was only an expedient measure. How could the anger and hatred in his heart be so easily dispelled? However, he also knew that Ji Tianxing and the others were all God King experts. If he really attacked, the other party would fight like a cornered beast and would definitely slaughter many of the Imperial Army soldiers. Even he and the State Preceptor might be seriously injured. Therefore, the Golden Dragon Emperor used a conciliatory strategy to persuade Ji Tianxing to surrender. Once he captured Ji Tianxing, he would definitely give the order to kill Yank and the others. Finally, he would use all kinds of torture methods to torture Ji Tianxing. This was the plan he had just come up with. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing was fated not to cooperate. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor with a strange expression and shook his head with a cold smile. "I gave you a chance to live, but you didn't cherish it. Since you're so stubborn, don't blame me for being merciless." With that, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and gave the order to attack. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan had been waiting for a long time and were itching to make a move. When they heard Ji Tianxing's order, the three of them exploded with violent divine power and used ferocious killing techniques to charge at the surrounding Imperial Army soldiers. 100 battles God-slaying, 10,000 breezy swords, falling stars of orchid rain. The three of them waved their divine weapons and unleashed dazzling divine spell brilliance. They unleashed an overwhelming amount of sword light toward the Imperial Army soldiers. The Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed when he saw that the three of them were still in good condition, full of divine power, and as strong as ever. "Didn't you already? How did this happen? The Imperial Army Governor and 200 Imperial Army soldiers fought with you for 2 hours, but you killed them all. How can you still have energy left?" The Golden Dragon Emperor couldn't understand. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were clearly in a sorry state with disheveled hair and bloodstains all over their bodies. No matter how strong they were, they should have been exhausted and severely injured after fighting with 200 Imperial Army soldiers. He didn't expect this to happen, and he didn't want to believe it. Ji Tianxing looked at him indifferently and said indifferently, "You know nothing about the power of the divine king realm." As soon as he finished speaking, the divine powers unleashed by Yank and the other two drowned the Imperial Army soldiers. The Imperial Army soldiers' expressions changed drastically as they used all their divine powers to block the attacks. But it was useless. Bang, 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 bang. Boom, 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 boom. A series of earth-shattering explosions rang out, shaking the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. The sea of lava within a few thousand miles was swept up by the destructive shock waves, stirring up huge waves. Endless seven-colored divine flames surged out of the lava and filled the entire area. More than 20 Imperial Army soldiers were injured and killed by Yank and the other two on the spot. Gaps and openings appeared in the encirclement, and they were drowned by the seven-colored divine fire. Instantly, the Imperial Army soldiers were forced into a panic. Many of them were infected by the seven-colored divine fire. Their armor and divine weapons were burned out of shape, and their divine bodies were also burned until black smoke rose from them. Painful screams erupted from the crowd, rising and falling one after another. As a result, the area became extremely chaotic. Seeing that the Imperial Army had suffered heavy casualties, the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor were shocked and quickly joined the battle. The two of them were about to join forces to attack Chao Qingyu and Lan when Ji Tianxing stopped them. Chapter 3380. Bam! Bam! Ji Tianxing brandished the Heaven Barrier sword and casually slashed out 2 sword lights, sending the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor flying. The two of them tumbled hundreds of miles away and were almost forced out of the battlefield. Just as they were about to fall into the sea of lava, they steadied themselves and stopped in midair, still in shock. Their crowns and divine crowns were a little crooked, and their hair was a little messy. They looked a little haggard. It was only now that the two of them witnessed Ji Tianxing's terrifying strength. The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned and muttered with a gloomy expression, "A godly king is indeed powerful." The Grand Tutor's expression was also very ugly. He echoed, "I didn't expect him to be so calm and composed after fighting with 200 Imperial Army soldiers. It's as if he didn't fight at all. Not only is he still full of divine power, but he's also not injured at all." The Golden Dragon Emperor nodded and said dejectedly, "I underestimated the strength and methods of a godly king. I'm afraid that today's battle won't end well. I'm afraid that these 100 Imperial Army soldiers will also die here. I only hope that Master can arrive soon. Otherwise, my life will also be in danger." The Golden Dragon Emperor was arrogant and domineering, running amok in the Golden Dragon region. However, he wasn't stupid. He knew how to size up the situation. The battle had just begun, and the two sides had only exchanged a few blows, but the Imperial Army had already lost a third of their forces. He and the Grand Tutor worked together, but they couldn't even block a casual strike from Ji Tianqing. He immediately understood that today's battle was doomed. They weren't a match for the four godly kings at all. Moreover, if the Golden Dragon region's ruler didn't arrive in time, he and the Grand Tutor wouldn't be able to escape. It was very likely that they would die under Ji Tianqing's sword. The Golden Dragon Emperor couldn't help but pray. At this moment, Ji Tianqing didn't chase after them. He was waving the burial of heaven and slaughtering the Imperial Army soldiers wantonly. Although more than 60 surviving Imperial Guards had formed a battle formation in the midst of the chaos, they were still unable to escape. However, Ji Tianqing and Yang's attacks were too ferocious. They came and went from east to west, making it impossible for the Imperial Army to track them down. This made it difficult for the Imperial Army to withstand, and a gap was quickly torn in the battle formation. Once a gap appeared, Ji Tianqing, Yang, and the others sped up their attacks. Before the Imperial Army could try to repair the gap rapidly widened and became unstoppable. In just 100 breaths of time, the Imperial Army's battle formation had crumbled. The remaining 50 or so Imperial Guardsmen were also divided into 3 groups, each of which faced the fierce attacks of Ji Tianqing, Yang, and Xiao Qingyu. They watched as the Imperial Army soldiers were killed one after another, their bodies pulverized under the flashes of swords and sabers. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial advisors killing intense sword, and they roared as they charged into the battlefield. But this was of little use, nor could it prevent the Imperial Army from being defeated. 15 minutes later, the great battle came to an end. Over 80 of the 100 Divine Lord Realm Imperial Guards were killed by Ji Tianqing and the others. The remaining dozen or so Imperial Army soldiers were also covered in blood and heavily injured. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor were also heavily injured. Their bodies were covered in blood, and their divine crowns were shattered. They looked extremely miserable. The Golden Dragon Emperor had expected to be defeated. However, he did not expect to be defeated so quickly and thoroughly. While he was shocked, he decisively ordered a retreat. Retreat! The Imperial Advisor hurriedly waved his scepter and shouted, "Everyone, follow me and protect His Majesty as he retreats." Of the dozen or so surviving Imperial Guards, half of them were captains of the Imperial Guards, and quite a few of them were High Divine Lords. They were all extremely loyal to the Golden Dragon Emperor and immediately followed the Imperial Advisor. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they had to buy time for the Golden Dragon Emperor and help him escape. Ji Tianqing and the other 3 chased after them at a leisurely pace, killing the surviving Imperial Army soldiers one by one. After 100 breaths of time, they had chased for more than 30,000 miles. At this time, the dozen or so Imperial Army soldiers were all killed. Not a single one was left. Only the Imperial Advisor survived until the end. Even though one of his arms had been cut off and his scepter had been shattered, he still protected the Golden Dragon Emperor. Whoosh! Whoosh! As divine light flickered, Ji Tianqing flew in front of them and blocked their path. Yang, Xiao Qingyu, and Lan followed closely and surrounded the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor. Their escape route was blocked from all directions. The 2 of them had nowhere to run and could only stop. "It's over." The Golden Dragon Emperor muttered silently, his heart filled with despair and indignation. "If I had known that there were 4 divine kings and that they were so powerful, I wouldn't have come personally. Even if I wanted to come, I should have endured it and come out with Master." At this moment, the Golden Dragon Emperor was filled with regret. He hated himself for being rash. If he could turn back time, he still wouldn't have let Ji Tianqing and the others go. However, he would have chosen to travel with the Golden Dragon region ruler. The Imperial Advisor's scepter was gone. He held 2 blood-stained scimitars in both hands and glared at Ji Tianqing and Yang with hatred. "If you want to deal with His Majesty, you'll have to kill me first." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Huh, you're loyal to the Golden Dragon Emperor, and your courage is commendable. However, it's useless. Both of you will die." The Golden Dragon Emperor took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He tried his best to remain calm and said in a low voice, "Brat, I underestimated your strength and methods. I admit defeat. This matter ends here. I will let bygones be bygones and won't take revenge on you. How about it? I hope you don't go too far and don't kill me. After all, I'm the Emperor of the Golden Dragon Empire and the region ruler's disciple. I believe that you have no enmity with the region ruler. You don't want to form a deep grudge with him because of this, right? Even though it was humiliating to take the initiative to ask for peace and would damage the Emperor's dignity. However, in order to survive, the Golden Dragon Emperor could only endure the humiliation and use an expedient plan. As long as he could survive, his face and revenge were not important. He believed that the other party was a foreign divine king. He would definitely be rational and calm. He would not be impulsive and really kill them all. He still had a chance to live. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing directly destroyed his fantasy. Ha ha! It's too late to beg for mercy now. I gave you a chance to live, but you didn't cherish it and insisted on courting death. I can only fulfill your wish. After saying that, Ji Tianqing waved his hand. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan understood. Without hesitation, they waved their weapons and slashed out destructive sword beams toward the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor. The two of them were suppressed by an invisible divine aura. They could not move an inch and could not dodge. The two of them were about to be drowned by the sword beams and were about to be smashed into pieces. At this moment, a huge spatial rift suddenly appeared in the sky above everyone's heads. Kacha! An expanse of dazzling golden divine light burst out from the 5-kilometer-long spatial rift, and it poured down like a tempestuous wave. Bam! 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 The divine powers that Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lana used were all blocked by the golden divine light. A dull sound exploded. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Advisor had narrowly escaped death. They both revealed happy smiles. In the next moment, two figures, a man and a woman, appeared from the spatial rift and descended on the scene. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 3381. Dazzling divine light illuminated a radius of 10,000 miles. The male and female god tribe powerhouses appeared on the battlefield, bathed in divine light. The two of them stood proudly and looked down at the crowd indifferently. Their postures were aloof. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Grand Tutor were overjoyed when they saw the two powerhouses appear. They hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Master and Mistress. We welcome your arrival. Greetings, Domain Lord and Mistress. We welcome your arrival. Just a moment ago, the two of them had been fleeing in panic and were filled with despair, but now they were in high spirits and full of energy. They didn't even feel pain from their injuries. Without a doubt, the people who had suddenly arrived and saved the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Grand Tutor were the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and his wife. The Golden Dragon Domain Lord nodded slightly and said indifferently, "You may rise." The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Grand Tutor straightened their backs and hurriedly flew in front of the Domain Lord and his wife to complain about Ji Tianqing's crimes. Master, those four bastards are the ones who invaded the Golden Dragon Empire and slaughtered the innocent god kings. Not only did they kill the Crown Prince and the War Prince, but they also slaughtered 300 Imperial guards and wanted to kill us. Fortunately, Master and Mistress came in time and saved us. Otherwise, the Grand Tutor and I would be dead by now. Domain Lord, those four bastards are incomparably cruel. Their methods are so cruel that it makes one's hair stand on end. They have harmed the Golden Dragon Empire and killed innocent people. If we don't get rid of them, they will definitely harm the Golden Dragon Empire and wreak havoc in the entire Golden Dragon domain. When that happens, the people of the Golden Dragon domain will be in dire straits and misery. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the Imperial Tutor both exaggerated and tearfully accused Ji Tianqing and the others of their evil deeds. Their acting was very realistic. Not only did Ji Tianqing and the others show disdainful sneers, but the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and his wife also frowned slightly. They seemed to think that the Golden Dragon Emperor and the Grand Tutor's performance was too exaggerated. Of course, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and his wife didn't show any dissatisfaction. The Golden Dragon Emperor was his disciple after all. If he was bullied and wronged, he would naturally complain to his master and ask for help. As his master and the overlord of the Golden Dragon domain, he naturally had to step in and resolve this matter. The ruler of the Golden Dragon region looked down at Ji Tianxing and the others from above. After sizing them up for a while, he sneered arrogantly. God Kings are rarely seen on normal days. I didn't think that 4 of them would appear today. However, do you think that just because you have more people, you can act tyrannically and commit crimes in this king's territory? 3 low-level divine kings and a 4th-stage realm middle-level divine king. No matter how many people there are, they're also nothing more than clay chickens and pottery dogs. Not only was the Golden Dragon region's domain master a mid-level god king, but it also reached the 5th level of the god king realm. Of course, he could see the strength of Ji Tianxing, Yank, and the others. Lan was the weakest among them, at the 1st level of the divine king realm. Ji Tianxing was slightly stronger. He was also at the 1st level of the god king realm. Chao Qingyu was ranked 2nd, 3rd divine king realm. The strongest among them, Yank, was only at the 4th level of the divine king realm. As for the ruler of the Golden Dragon region, he was a 5th-stage realm middle-level divine king. The beautiful lady beside him, who was also his master's wife, Qiu Lian, was also at the 3rd level of the god king realm. Therefore, the ruler of the Golden Dragon region did not put Ji Tianxing and the others in his eyes. Divine King Qiu Lian held onto the ruler's arm and looked down at Yank indifferently. She said, "Big guy, you might be an overlord in other parts of the continent. Unfortunately, you've already crossed the line. Do you understand the saying, a strong dragon cannot suppress a local snake? What's more, you're a snake that has crossed the line. We're the dragons that have coiled up." Yank was stunned. He frowned and looked at Divine King Qiulian. He muttered to himself, "Is there something wrong with this old woman's eyes? Why are you talking nonsense with me?" Unexpectedly, not only Divine King Qiulian, but even the ruler of the Golden Dragon region looked down at him and said coldly, "Big guy, we're all god kings. This king will give you a chance to reconcile on account of your difficult cultivation. As long as you hand over your 3 companions to me and apologize to me, this king will let you go. However, you have to promise me that you'll never set foot in the Golden Dragon region again. How about it?" The ruler of the Golden Dragon region's intentions were obvious. Although he was confident that he could defeat Ji Tianxing and Yank, they were still god kings. If he and Divine King Qiulian were to fight to the death, they would be severely injured even if they could kill them. Since that was the case, it would be best to avoid bloodshed. However, Yank obviously would not agree. He looked up at the ruler of the Golden Dragon region and Divine King Qiulian and sneered. "Firstly, the 2 of you are no match for us. You're the ones who should be begging for mercy. Secondly, you can't even tell who's the core of the group. You're not fit to show off your strength in front of this king." After he finished speaking, Yin took a step back and stood behind Ji Tianxing, his hands hanging by his side. The ruler of the Golden Dragon region and Divine King Qiulian were stunned. Only then did they realize that Ji Tianxing was the core of the group. Their expressions were awkward, and their eyes were filled with doubt. They frowned and sized up Ji Tianxing. He's just a 1st Heaven Realm God King. How can he control 3rd and 4th Heaven Realm God Kings? That white-robed kid looks ordinary, but he's the core of the group? Could he be the young master of some ancient clan? Or is he the son of some high-level God King? The ruler of the Golden Dragon region and Divine King Qiulian looked at each other and communicated secretly. They could not figure it out. At this time, the Golden Dragon Emperor and the State Preceptor quickly explained to them, "Lord Ruler, please don't underestimate that white-robed youth. He is indeed the strongest of the 4. Although his strength is not as strong as the other 2 God Kings, his strength is much stronger. However, his battle prowess is even stronger, and the techniques he uses are even more profound and exquisite." The ruler of the Golden Dragon region nodded slightly and thought to himself, "He's only a 1st Heaven Realm God King, but he's stronger than a 4th Heaven Realm God King? Interesting. I would like to see for myself if there's such a genius in this world." Divine King Qiulian frowned and reminded her son, long that kid can make intermediate god kings submit to him. He must be extraordinary. Don't underestimate him. Before the ruler of the Golden Dragon region could reply, Ji Tianxing asked, "Have you guys come up with a plan? Are we going to fight or not? If you're scared out of your wits, apologize to me and take those two idiots away." Compared to the Golden Dragon region's ruler's arrogance, Ji Tianxing's words were even more arrogant. The ruler of the Golden Dragon region and divine King Qiu Lian frowned, and a cold light flashed in their eyes. "Kid, you're too arrogant. Why don't you take a look at where you are? How dare you act so presumptuously?" The ruler of the Golden Dragon region and divine King Qiu Lian shouted angrily and immediately took out their king gray divine weapons. Their bodies emitted a terrifying, murderous aura. An invisible god king's aura spread in all directions and sealed off an area of 10,000 miles. The Golden Dragon Emperor and the State Preceptor were excited and fearful. They quickly retreated far away to avoid being affected by the battle. Chapter 3382. Divine King Qiu Lian's weapons were two low-grade, king-level feather fans. The pure white feather fan wasn't big, but it had an ancient charm. It was exquisitely made. There was a circle of divine jade pendants around the feather fan, which wrapped around 12 different colored and elemental king-level immortal stones. The power of these two divine artifacts was extraordinary, and they complemented each other well when she held them in her hands. The Golden Dragon region ruler's weapon was a 5-foot-long golden dragon truncheon. The truncheon was dark gold, and it looked like a 5-clawed golden dragon. It exuded a holy and ferocious aura, even though it was only a low-grade, king-level divine weapon. The Golden Dragon Truncheon was made by the Golden Dragon region ruler's master after thousands of years of hard work. It was extremely powerful. After the Golden Dragon region ruler obtained it, he had nurtured it for more than 10,000 years. He had already turned it into his natal divine weapon, which made it even more powerful and effective. "Kid, let me see what right you have to be so arrogant." The Golden Dragon region ruler roared. He made a hand seal with his left hand and waved the truncheon with his right hand. He charged toward Ji Tianxing valiantly. He took a step forward and appeared above Ji Tianxing's head. He smashed the truncheon down with the truncheon. The Golden Dragon mace emitted a blinding golden light. It unleashed a destructive force that suppressed Ji Tianxing. "Good timing." Ji Tianxing roared and waved the burial of heaven fearlessly. He used his ultimate sword technique to block the Golden Dragon region ruler's attack. Galaxy Break. The burial of heaven shone with silver divine light and formed a giant starry sword that was 10,000 feet long. It slashed toward the Golden Dragon truncheon. Everything within a few thousand miles was illuminated by the golden and silver light. Everyone seemed to see billions of stars falling and a divine golden dragon flying across the sky. Several hundred types of divine Tao laws also released a vast and mighty power, causing layers of divine Tao runes to appear in the sky. The first move of the two was their most powerful ultimate divine ability. Everyone was in awe. Kaboom! In the next moment, the giant starry sword and the golden divine dragon collided. A deafening explosion spread for 10,000 miles. The giant starry sword was shattered, and billions of rays of starlight spilled out. It was as if the stars were falling from the sky. The golden divine dragon was also shaken, and dazzling golden light bloomed like fireworks. The Golden Dragon region ruler and Ji Tianxing clashed and gained the upper hand in the first move. He was only pushed back 10,000 feet, and the truncheon in his hand trembled a dozen times. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, was sent flying 30 miles away, rolling and crashing into the lava ocean below. The Golden Dragon region ruler's combat power. Yin Ku and Chao Qingyu were filled with worry, but the Golden Dragon Emperor and Imperial Tutor were cheering excitedly. The Golden Dragon region ruler was the Golden Dragon region ruler was the Golden Dragon region rulers. He disappeared from where he was Golden Dragon. In the next moment, he teleported behind the Golden Dragon Domain's domain master and stabbed 49 times with his sword. This was his ultimate sword technique. Even though the Golden Dragon Region Master had the upper hand, he didn't underestimate his opponent. He seemed to have anticipated that Ji Tianxing would take advantage of the situation to counterattack. He swung the Golden Dragon Truncheon in a backhand motion and unleashed 9 divine and mighty Golden Dragon shadows. 9 dragons seal the sky. Bang, 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 bang. 9 domineering Golden Dragon silhouettes that were tens of thousands of feet long smashed through the sword lights in the sky and headed toward Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing didn't try to block it, nor did he try to take it head-on. With a flash, he teleported 500 miles away, retreating far away. Boom! The 9 Golden Dragon silhouettes carried with them the power to destroy heaven and earth as they fiercely crashed into the vast sea of lava, splashing up huge waves that soared into the sky. Massive waves of 10,000 feet tall blotted out the sun as boundless 7-color divine flames sealed off an area within a radius of 10,000 miles. The Golden Dragon Region Ruler and the Golden Dragon Region Ruler were shocked. They quickly ran away to avoid being affected by the divine fire. At this moment, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan had joined forces to attack Divine King Qiulian. Unfortunately, Divine King Qiulian was only at the 3rd heaven realm. Even though she was old and had cultivated for a long time, she was only slightly stronger than Chao Qingyu. With Lan she was at a disadvantage. She could only defend and defend. Yang's attack pushed her into the abyss of hell. She was getting closer and closer to death. Bang, bang, bang. Rumble. The two sides fought fiercely in the sky. They used all kinds of exquisite divine powers and clashed fiercely in the sky. The divine lights and shadows all over the sky were shattered. Billions of divine light shards fell from the sky and generated a destructive blast wave that swept across tens of thousands of miles in radius. This region was in complete chaos. It had completely become a world of lava and 7-colored divine flames. The Golden Dragon Region Ruler and the Golden Dragon Region Ruler tried their best to escape. However, the Golden Dragon Region Ruler couldn't avoid the lava waves in time and was swallowed by the divine fire. He was already severely injured. One of his arms had been cut off, so his strength was greatly reduced. After being engulfed by the giant wave of lava and the 7-color divine fire, he could only struggle and scream a few times before he was burned to ashes by the 7-color divine fire. Even his godhead didn't manage to escape the sea of fire. It fell into the sea of lava and soon vanished into thin air. The Golden Dragon Region Ruler was furious and helpless. He watched the Golden Dragon Region Ruler die, but he couldn't save him. He didn't even have time to stop and feel sad. He could only try his best to escape. Otherwise, he would also be engulfed by the lava waves and burned to ashes by the divine fire. He had great confidence in the Golden Dragon Region Ruler and Divine King Qiulian. However, a battle between divine kings like this was not something he could participate in. He didn't even have the right to watch the battle nearby. Finally, he escaped from the area enveloped by the lava and 7-color divine flames after he had fled 30,000 miles away. He was finally safe. Only then did he dare to stop and look at the battlefield. Unfortunately, he was too far away. The center of the battlefield was a mess. He could only see the lava and divine fire. He couldn't see the situation of the divine kings. Even if he released his divine perception, he couldn't see through the chaotic divine power. He couldn't even see the situation at the center of the battlefield. The Golden Dragon Region Ruler and Divine King Qiulian couldn't do anything. He could only pray in his heart that the Region Ruler and Divine King Qiulian could kill Ji Tianxing and the others quickly. However, the actual situation on the battlefield was completely different from what the Golden Dragon Region Ruler had imagined. Divine King Qiulian was surrounded by Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan. She was at a disadvantage from the beginning. She was in a very dangerous situation. After exchanging a few blows, she was sent flying by Yank and vomited blood. After that, she was in a state of defense and escape. She gritted her teeth and endured Yank and the other two's fierce attacks. She didn't even have time to breathe. As time passed, her divine power was quickly depleted. Her injuries worsened, and she looked more and more miserable. Not far away, the Golden Dragon region ruler had the upper hand. His Golden Dragon Jian was a king-grade divine weapon, while Ji Tianxing's Burial of Heaven was a monarch-grade divine weapon. Even if their combat strength was equal, Ji Tianxing was at a disadvantage because of his weapon. He couldn't fight the Golden Dragon region ruler head-on. He could only fight from afar. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 3383. The Golden Dragon Domain's domain master had been taking the initiative to attack, forcing Ji Tianxing to retreat and move away quickly. However, he couldn't injure Ji Tianxing in a short period of time. Moreover, he realized that Divine King Qiu Yin was in a perilous situation. She was already covered in wounds. Seeing Divine King Qiu Yin's disheveled hair and blood-stained dress, his heart tightened. He quickly rushed over to help. However, Ji Tianxing went all out to attack the Golden Dragon region's domain master. The Golden Dragon domain ruler was immediately held back. He couldn't ignore Ji Tianxing's attacks. He could only stop and use his arts to block and neutralize them. Even though Ji Tianxing's fierce attacks didn't work and were all neutralized by him, he was still being held back by Ji Tianxing. He couldn't leave at all, let alone help Divine King Qiu Yin. He couldn't help Ji Tianxing at all. The two sides were more than 2,000 miles apart. He could only watch as Divine King Qiu Yin's injuries worsened under the combined attacks of Yank and the other two. Every time Divine King Qiu Yin was sent flying or suffered new wounds or screamed in pain, the Golden Dragon domain ruler's heart would twitch. He used all kinds of methods and used all his strength to help Divine King Qiu Yin. However, he was stopped by Ji Tianxing. The Golden Dragon domain ruler was helpless. He didn't care about his own injuries after taking one of Ji Tianxing's attacks. He wanted to teleport to save Divine King Qiu Yin. However, Ji Tianxing had already noticed his intentions. He decisively used the space, snapping Rising Dragon Slash. Crack! A divine golden dragon, tens of thousands of feet long, roared at the sky. It tore open a 500-mile-long spatial rift in the sea of lava. The pitch-black rift was like an abyss. It separated the two sides of the space. The Golden Dragon domain ruler's teleportation was stopped. He couldn't hold back his killing intent and anger any longer. He exploded. You damn beast. I'm going to cut you into pieces and pull out your tendons. The realm master of the Golden Dragon realm cursed like a madman as he unleashed his most powerful killing move at Ji Tianxing at the cost of 1,000 years of cultivation. Meteor Dragon Annihilation Strike. The Golden Dragon domain master gripped the Golden Dragon truncheon with both hands and glared at Ji Tianxing with his eyes wide open. His whole body was burning with bloody flames as he swung the truncheon at Ji Tianxing. The Golden Dragon mace shone with boundless divine light, condensing into a 100-mile-long divine golden dragon that descended from the sky. Boom! The divine golden dragon fell like a meteor. It destroyed the two layers of golden light with a loud bang, passed through the space crack, and rushed in front of Ji Tianxing. It seemed that Ji Tianxing had no time to dodge and was about to be struck by the Holy Golden Dragon. Even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. At the critical moment, he finally used his trump card that he hadn't used for a long time. Sword of Destruction. The world of 5 elements provided a vast amount of power, which condensed into a 100-mile-long golden sword. This sword pierced through the sky and the sea of magma. It was like a sword that split open the heavens. Its divine might was violent to the extreme. Boom! The holy giant sword unleashed an apocalyptic might as it struck the holy golden dragon, resulting in an earth-shattering boom. At that moment, the sea of magma within a radius of 30,000 miles was shaken and stirred up. The loud bang spread for 60 to 70,000 miles before it gradually disappeared. The holy giant sword and the golden dragon collapsed at the same time, erupting a destructive shock wave that swept in all directions. In this clash of moves, it was still Ji Tianxing who was at a disadvantage. He was sent flying 100 miles away. His face was pale, his chest was heaving up and down rapidly, and he coughed up blood. After all, the Golden Dragon Domain Master had used up 1,000 years of cultivation to forcibly double his combat power, making the Meteor Dragon Annihilation Strike's power to the extreme. Although Ji Tianxing borrowed the power of the world of 5 elements, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was not a king-level divine artifact after all, so it couldn't exert its full power. Naturally, Ji Tianxing was defeated by the Golden Dragon Domain Master's truncheon again. However, only his internal organs were injured. His divine Dao foundation was not damaged, so it didn't affect his ability to continue fighting. When the Golden Dragon Domain Master saw that Ji Tianxing was pushed back, he seized this rare opportunity and rushed into the distance to save divine King Qiulian. However, he had just used up 1,000 years of cultivation to use a forbidden technique, so his body was greatly affected. His combat power was quickly weakened, and his speed was also reduced. However, he didn't care. He only wanted to save divine King Qiulian, so he rushed over as fast as he could. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan'er swung their swords again and were about to strike divine King Qiulian. The Golden Dragon Domain Master roared and rushed over without caring about his own safety. He waved his truncheon and shot out dozens of divine lights, blocking Yank and company's attacks. Divine King Qiulian finally had a chance to catch her breath. When she saw the Golden Dragon Domain Master rushing over to save her without caring about his own safety, she was deeply moved, and her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. However, the Golden Dragon Domain Master was anxious and didn't have time to communicate with her through voice transmission to ask about her injuries. He waved his truncheon and forced Yank and Chao Qingyu back. At the same time, he shouted to divine King Qiulian, "Lianer, come over quickly. Let's leave this place." Without a doubt, the Golden Dragon Domain Master was thinking of retreating. After the intense battle just now, he had already witnessed Ji Tianxing's terrifying strength. Although he was slightly better and could suppress Ji Tianxing, the Golden Dragon Domain Master was outnumbered. However, they had the advantage in numbers. With 3 God Kings surrounding Qiulian, if they continued to drag things out, God King Qiulian would definitely die. Under such circumstances, the Golden Dragon Domain Master had to assess the situation and escape with divine King Qiulian first. He would find a chance to take revenge in the future. However, it was a pity. Before divine King Qiulian could reach the Golden Dragon Domain Master, Ji Tianxing caught up and attacked the Golden Dragon Domain Master fiercely. Swish, 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 Heavenly Dragon Slash, Sky-Breaking Sword. The Golden Dragon Domain Master had no choice but to use his truncheon to block Ji Tianxing's attacks with all his might. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan rushed toward divine King Qiulian and attacked her together. The previous scene played out once again. The two sides were in a fierce battle. The Golden Dragon Domain Master and divine King Qiulian were separated and could not look after each other. This time, the Golden Dragon Domain Master could not sacrifice his 1,000 years of cultivation to forcefully break free from Ji Tianxing's entanglement. No matter how furious and manic he was, he could only carefully deal with Ji Tianxing's fierce attacks and attacks. Seeing divine King Qiulian's injuries getting worse and worse, and her screams of pain, he was so angry that he almost went berserk. Time passed. Half an hour passed quickly. The first to give up was the heavily injured and weak divine King Qiulian. When she was sent flying by Chao Qingyu and Lan, Yin let out a furious roar and stabbed out with his bronze halberd, piercing through her forehead. Kacha! With a crisp crack, divine King Qiulian's head exploded, splattering blood everywhere. Her divine body was destroyed, and her corpse fell into the sea of lava. Only a quintessence escaped into the distance. However, Yin chased after her, and after a few breaths of time, he shattered her godhead with his halberd. Swish! 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 More than a dozen quintessence fragments fell into the sky and drifted away. Just like that, divine King Qiulian died. Not far away, the Golden Dragon Domain Master saw this scene with his own eyes. As if struck by lightning, his body stiffened, and his eyes turned bloodshot. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3384. If the Golden Dragon Domain ruler were to ask who he loved the most in this world, it would be himself. However, the one who was second to him was his master's wife, Qiu-Lian. 18,000 years ago, he was attracted by Qiu-Lian's beauty and temperament. That was why he became the disciple of the bearded man. His master was rather boorish. He was a typical hot-headed man. He didn't know how to be romantic, nor did he know how to take care of people. However, he was willing to be his master's disciple and serve him wholeheartedly. It was all because his master's wife silently watched him, encouraged and cared for him. No matter how strict his master was with him, no matter how much he scolded or beat him, he endured it. When his master went into seclusion and went out, it was the happiest time of his life. That was because it was just him and his master's wife. As time passed, the relationship between the two became more and more distorted and deep. Gradually, his master found some clues. He had some suspicions, but he didn't have any evidence. Therefore, his master vented his anger on the ruler of the Golden Dragon region. He was even more strict with him, scolding and beating him for the slightest carelessness. The ruler of the Golden Dragon region continued to endure, but the hatred in his heart accumulated over time. His master was no longer someone he respected, but a thorn in his heart. He wanted to get rid of him the most. 12,000 years ago, the ruler of the Golden Dragon region also broke through to the Divine King realm. He began to plan how to get rid of his master. He racked his brains and tried all kinds of methods to get rid of him. A few hundred years later, he finally encountered a golden opportunity that came once in a blue moon. Therefore, he took advantage of his master's seclusion to sneak attack him. His master was severely injured and fell into a pool of blood. He glared at him with hatred and resentment and asked him why he did it. Were they that impatient to snatch the inherited divine ability in the Golden Dragon Swordbreaker? At that time, the ruler of the Golden Dragon region was very calm and answered frankly, "I didn't do it for the inheritance or the Golden Dragon Jian. I did it for the woman I love the most." His master suddenly realized and roared in anger, "That's your master's wife. You disgraceful beast. You will be punished by the heavens." The ruler of the Golden Dragon region didn't feel guilty at all. Instead, he sneered proudly, "She will no longer be my master's wife after I get rid of you." His master counterattacked and used a forbidden technique. He also severely injured the ruler of the Golden Dragon region. After all, he was too young, and the difference in strength between him and his master was too great. He was about to be killed by his master on the spot. Or perhaps, both master and disciple would perish together. At this moment, Qiu-Lian appeared. She ignored her master's cries for help. She only had eyes for the Golden Dragon Domain's ruler. Under her master's incredulous gaze, she took out a divine weapon and stabbed it into her master's forehead. Just like that, his master died with his eyes wide open. The realm master of the Golden Dragon Domain felt like he was in a dream. From then on, he swore in his heart that he would only love Qiu-Lian and would never betray her. In this world, only Qiu-Lian was the most important person to him. Later on, he fulfilled his initial wish and got together with Qiu-Lian. He had always thought that he and Qiu-Lian would love each other forever and be happy together. But he never imagined that Qiu-Lian would be killed by 3 alien god kings right before his eyes. Moreover, they died very miserably. They were reduced to ashes, and not even a corpse was left behind. The realm master of the Golden Dragon Domain's heart was shattered. It was as if the strongest pillar in his heart was gone. At that moment, he even felt that life was meaningless. He only wanted to die with Qiu-Lian. So much so that he unconsciously self-destructed. He wanted Ji Tianxing, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and the rest to die with Qiu-Lian. Let's die together. The realm master of the Golden Dragon Domain roared like a madman. He shook his head wildly, and his messy hair danced in the wind. His entire body was burning with bloody flames. His aura became incomparably chaotic and violent. His divine body also began to sway. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were shocked and fearful. Their expressions became serious. "Damn it, this guy is crazy. Is that woman that important to him? He wants to self-destruct and drag us down with him? A fifth-stage God King's self-destruction will definitely destroy everything within a few 100,000 miles. We can't escape. This time, we are really going to die with him. The power of a middle-stage God King's self-destruction was unimaginably terrifying. Not to mention Chao, Qingyu, and Lan, or even Ji Tianxing and Yank did not have the confidence to save their lives. But now that things had come to this, they could not sit still and wait for death. They could only escape as fast as they could. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In just 2 short breaths, the 4 of them had teleported a few times and retreated 30,000 miles away. At this moment, a scene that left everyone dumbfounded appeared. The furious realm master of the Golden Dragon domain stopped his self-destruction. His swollen divine body returned to normal, and the bloody flames on his body disappeared. Swoosh! While Ji Tianxing and the rest were unprepared, he used his ultimate skill and broke open a crack in space. He decisively entered it. In the next moment, he crossed 100,000 miles and appeared on the surface of the magma sea. He did not even look back as he fled toward the exit of the abyss. That works? This. He has already self-destructed. How can he stop halfway? Maybe he has some special technique? After all, he is a middle-stage God King. He might have mastered some kind of ultimate skill. Who knows? That guy looked angry and crazy. I didn't expect that to be his disguise. He had already made up his mind to use this method to force us to retreat and then escape. He is too cunning. Just now, I thought that he loved his wife so much that he would rather die with her. I didn't expect him to be such a hypocrite. It's so disgusting. Lan was very disappointed and disdainful. Yank and Chao Qingyu nodded in agreement. Ji Tianxing sighed and said faintly, "It seems that the realm master of the Golden Dragon domain loves himself the most." Yank looked in the direction that the realm master of the Golden Dragon domain had escaped. Then, he looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "Master, should we chase after him?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "No need. We can't catch up. It's just a waste of time." This was the truth. Although the realm master of the Golden Dragon domain was injured, his injuries were not serious. He still retained most of his strength. The most important thing was that he had pretended to self-destruct to scare everyone away. The distance between them was more than 100,000 miles. The terrain of the magma sea was complicated. It was too difficult to catch up with the realm master of the Golden Dragon domain. After a while, the divine light that covered the sky dissipated. The magma sea gradually calmed down. Ji Tianxing ordered, "Everyone is slightly injured and spent a lot of energy. Let's rest and recuperate first. The realm master of the Golden Dragon domain has escaped. He won't dare to seek revenge in the short term. No one in the entire Golden Dragon domain can threaten us. After you have recovered, we will look for the king-level divine object that is about to appear. After we get the divine object, we can leave the abyss." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3385. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan had been fighting for a long time and were exhausted. Not only did they need to recover their divine power, but they also needed to treat their injuries. Therefore, they returned to Chao Qingyu's divine ship to recuperate. Ji Tianxing cleaned up the battlefield alone and searched for spoils of war in the Sea of Lava. Even though they had managed to kill 300 Imperial Army members in the previous battles, they were still unable to do so. Countless divine weapons, interspatial rings, and shards of godheads were scattered in the Sea of Lava. But now that 2 hours had passed, those monarch-grade divine weapons, interspatial rings, and shards of godheads had long been incinerated by the 7-colored divine fire. Ji Tianxing and the other 3 fought with the Golden Dragon Region Master and Divine King Xiaolian. The shockwaves from the battle were enough to destroy the remaining debris. Therefore, in the chaotic battlefield, there were no spoils of war to speak of. Only, Divine King Xiaolian's shard of Godhead had fallen from the sky into the Sea of Lava and was drifting slowly. After all, Divine King Xiaolian had died less than 100 breaths ago. She was a 3rd Heaven Realm Divine King. Neither the lava nor the seven-color divine fire could melt her shard of godhead in a short period of time. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianxing quickly found divine King Xiao Yin's shard of godhead in the sea of lava and kept it in his interspatial ring. Then, he brought Xiao Qingyu's divine ship and flew to the reef island 40,000 miles away. He began to recuperate. The reef island was not big. It was only 100 feet wide and looked like a huge rock protruding out of the sea of lava. Because the island was too small and had no veins, no one cared about it. After the Battle of the Divine Kings, the reef island was also affected. It was torn apart and shrunk by half. Ji Tianxing took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and placed it on the reef island before entering the distorted space. After a while, he flew to the center of the distorted space and returned to the bloody flame sacred tree. When he was still far away, he felt that something was wrong. Today, the blood flame sacred tree was especially dazzling, like a blazing torch soaring into the sky. When he got closer, he saw that the blood flame sacred tree was burning fiercely, and purple flames were rising into the sky. What surprised Ji Tianxing even more was that the blood flame sacred tree, which was originally 12,000 feet tall, was actually growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The entire divine tree continued to grow taller and taller, and new branches and leaves quickly grew out. It also exuded a vast and powerful divine aura. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing was stunned for a moment before revealing a gratified smile. From the looks of it, the blood flame sacred tree has absorbed too much blood essence. Is it going to break through the limit of the monarch realm and evolve into the divine king realm? With his previous experience, Ji Tianxing could tell at a glance that the blood flame sacred tree must have been injected with a huge amount of energy during the previous battle. 300 Divine Lord Realm Imperial Guards had been killed. It was unknown just how much blood energy and souls the blood flame sacred tree had absorbed. And just now, Divine King Xiao Yin had also been killed. When a Divine King expert died, the soul and blood energy that seeped out was countless times purer and stronger than that of a divine lord. Over the years, the blood flame sacred tree had devoured far too many divine lord experts' blood energy and souls, but it had remained at the supreme grade monarch level. But now, Divine King Xiao Yin's death had become an opportunity for the blood flame sacred tree to break through. This should be considered an unexpected gain. Ji Tianxing murmured to himself, feeling very satisfied in his heart. Based on the current evolution speed, the blood flame sacred tree would need another 3 to 5 days before it could truly break through to the divine king level. Ji Tianxing did not waste any more time. He sat cross-legged under the sacred tree and began to circulate his energy to heal his injuries and recover his divine power. At the same time, the Golden Dragon Domain ruler hurriedly left the Golden Dragon Abyss and returned to the vast sea of clouds. Around the Abyss exit, more than 100 factions had left behind many divine warships, as well as countless divine lord experts and guards. Fortunately, the Golden Dragon Domain ruler had chosen to teleport thousands of miles away from the Abyss exit, so no one had seen him. Otherwise, his disheveled and ragged appearance would have been seen by the experts of the various empires, and the news would have spread throughout the Golden Dragon Domain. At that time, his prestige as a domain ruler would plummet, and his reputation and prestige would be questioned. Huff! Huff! The ruler of the Golden Dragon realm panted heavily as he turned his head to look at the Golden Dragon Abyss. Seeing that Ji Tianxing and the others did not chase after him, he was slightly relieved and flew into the distance. Along the way, his anger had yet to subside. His heart was filled with hatred. His face was still twisted and ferocious, and his eyes were vicious and resentful. He had seen the woman he loved the most being killed in front of his eyes, and not even her corpse was left intact. Who could understand that kind of anger, hatred, and pain? If possible, the Golden Dragon Domain ruler was willing to capture Ji Tianxing and the others at all costs and torture them with the cruelest of punishments. Even if he extracted their souls and tortured them with lightning and divine fire for 10,000 years, it would not be enough to appease the hatred in the Golden Dragon Domain ruler's heart. Liena, don't worry. No matter what price I have to pay, I will avenge you. After a long time, the Golden Dragon Domain ruler finally calmed down, and he muttered through gritted teeth. After calming down, he began to think about how to take revenge. He was the only God King left in the Golden Dragon Domain, and he was no match for Ji Tianxing and the others. Even if another God King like Lien came, she would only be courting death. Therefore, if he wanted to kill Ji Tianxing and the others, he had to find a stronger God King who was not weaker than him. Apart from that, he also had to come up with a plan to take revenge. At the thought of finding help, the figures of several God Kings immediately appeared in the Golden Dragon Domain ruler's mind. Those God King powerhouses were the domain lords of the Golden Dragon region. Some of them had grudges with him, some of them had no relationship with him, and some of them were his friends. Therefore, he took out a special communication jade slip and sent a message to his best friend. My younger brother, Fei Hong, I've run into trouble today. Without a doubt, this message was sent to Yun Yang's domain ruler, Jing Fei Hong. Naturally, the Golden Dragon Domain ruler would not be hypocritical and polite to his best friend. He went straight to the point and explained what had happened. He wanted to ask Jing Fei Hong for help to fight Ji Tianxing and the others. For this, he could pay a huge price, such as ceding his territory, gifting a large number of people and cultivation resources, and so on. However, something he did not expect happened. After a quarter of an hour, Jing Fei Hong replied with a message. In the message, Jing Fei Hong's tone was rather odd as he asked, Brother Long, is the God King of a foreign race you mentioned a human youth? He's wearing a white robe with black hair and black eyes. He's very handsome, and he's holding a pitch-black, sovereign-level divine sword. If it's him, then it's not surprising. Not too long ago, he had fought a great battle with this king in Yunyang region. He injured this king and even killed the High Wind Divine King. I didn't expect him to go to your Golden Dragon Domain after leaving the Cloud Domain and kill your beloved wife. Don't worry, Brother Long. He's our common enemy. I'll help you kill him. Chapter 3386. After receiving Jing Fei Hong's message, Jade Slip, the Golden Dragon Region Lord was stunned for a moment, his face full of astonishment. That human kid in white robes is called Tianxing. He claims to be the Region Lord of Tiger Cleave and fought with Jing Fei Hong. In that case, he came all the way south from Yunyang region to Golden Dragon region. Not only did he kill Ling Feng Divine King, but he also injured Jing Fei Hong. The Golden Dragon region Lord murmured to himself. He felt that this was too much of a coincidence to be true. However, on second thought, this was also a good thing. At least, Tianxing had a deep grudge against Jing Fei Hong. He could ask Jing Fei Hong for help without paying any price, ceding his territory, or gifting cultivation resources. However, after some careful consideration, he still felt uneasy. This won't do. That kid is very strong and has 3 divine kings as his helpers. Even if I join forces with Jing Fei Hong, I don't have much confidence in winning. I need to find more helpers to have enough confidence. After making up his mind, the Golden Dragon Region Lord took out 2 message jade slips and sent messages to the other 2 region lords. These 2 region lords were considered to be on better terms with him among the few region lords around Golden Dragon region. Although they did not have a deep relationship, at least there was no conflict or hatred. They could be considered acquaintances. The Golden Dragon region Lord knew very well that the other party might not be willing to help without a reason. Therefore, he straightforwardly stated his reason and said that he was willing to cede a part of his territory and gift a batch of cultivation resources. After sending the message, he continued on his way back to the Divine Palace. After waiting for about an hour, one of the region lords sent back a message. Whoosh! When the message jade slip landed in his hand, he quickly released his divine sense to read the message inside. A middle-aged man's voice immediately sounded in his mind. Lord Golden Dragon Region Lord, I'm very sorry. My region lord began his seclusion 20 years ago and is now at a critical juncture of his cultivation. I'm afraid my region lord will not come out of seclusion for 100 years. I apologize again for not being able to help you. Without a doubt, the person who sent the message was not the region master, but the region master's assistant, another lower divine king. The Golden Dragon region's domain master was rather depressed and helpless at the same time. Regardless of whether the region lord was really in closed-door cultivation or using closed-door cultivation as an excuse, he could no longer seek help from the other party, nor could he blame the other party. He could only continue to wait and place his hopes on the second domain lord. Another 2 hours passed. The ruler of the Golden Dragon realm had already left the entrance of the abyss and was flying through the sea of clouds. At this moment, the second area master finally sent him a message. When he finished reading the contents of the message, he immediately frowned, and his face became gloomy. Damn it! Yi Qing, that old thief, actually took advantage of the situation and asked for a sky-high price. Truly abominable to the extreme. The Golden Dragon region master's face was ashen with rage, and he clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked, and his eyes were burning with fury. Originally, he had offered domain Lord Yi Qing 2 domains and 20 billion worth of cultivation resources as a gift. Unexpectedly, Yi Qing said a lot of hypocrisy. After beating around the bush, he demanded an exorbitant price. He actually wanted the territories of 10 regions and cultivation resources worth hundreds of billions. The Golden Dragon region master's offer was 5 times the price. Most importantly, the Golden Dragon region master understood Yi Qing's nature. He knew that the latter was insatiably greedy, cunning, and shameless. Even if he gritted his teeth and agreed to Yi Qing's terms, Yi Qing would definitely add more rewards and other conditions. In short, Yi Qing would definitely take advantage of this opportunity to ruthlessly extort a large sum of money from him. The Golden Dragon region master was filled with rage. He hated and despised Yi Qing. However, he did not immediately reject the offer and chose to put this matter aside for now. After thinking about it, he decided to send another message to Jing Feihong to discuss the specific countermeasures. Feihong, my brother, this time in the Golden Dragon Abyss, Tianqing has 2 more Divine Kings by his side. A big guy at the 4th level of the Divine King realm and a woman at the 1st level of the Divine King realm. They have the advantage in numbers, and their combat strength has greatly increased. They are full of cunning. I'm afraid that it will be difficult for the 2 of us to deal with them, let alone kill Tianqing for revenge. I think that we should think of a way to get the help of other region masters and divine kings. Only then will it be possible. After about 15 minutes, Jing Feihong sent back a message. The Golden Dragon region master hurriedly received the message Jade Slip and read its contents. Jing Feihong said in a low voice, "Brother Long, you are absolutely right. Tianqing is not only full of cunning, but the divine arts and secret techniques he has mastered are also very exquisite and strange. It is impossible to guard against them. I was previously heavily injured and only recently came out of seclusion after recovering from my injuries. I am currently thinking of a way to take revenge. With the 2 of us, it is indeed impossible to kill them. However, I have a good idea. I would like to share it with Brother Long for your consideration. The foreign divine kings have invaded our territory and killed the innocent. They are tyrannical and tyrannical. We should report this matter to the Azura God Emperor and let the God Emperor deal with it. However, the God Emperor has never shown himself, and he is so high and mighty. If we trouble him with such a small matter, it will make us look incompetent. However, the God Emperor has a group of inspectors under his command. They are called the Haotian Oracles. Usually, the Haotian Oracles replace the God Emperor to patrol the hundreds of regions in the Haotian continent and deal with all kinds of complicated matters. The Haotian Oracles are honorable. They represent the God Emperor in person and are qualified to mobilize the military forces of all regions. In addition, each Haotian Oracles is a middle-level divine king with super strong combat power. Coincidentally, a Haotian Oracles entered the Sanchuan region a month ago and seem to be investigating an unsolved case. We can jointly report to the Haotian Oracles and ask him to help us solve it. After reading the contents of the Jade Slip, the Golden Dragon Region Master's eyes suddenly lit up, and he became excited. Yes, why didn't I think of that? We can't disturb the Azura God Emperor, but we can ask the Hautian Oracles for help. The Hautian Oracles patrol the world and are responsible for maintaining the stability of all regions and dealing with all kinds of conflicts and contradictions. It is best to ask the Hautian Oracles for this kind of thing. No matter how strong Tianqing is, it is impossible for him to go against the Hautian Oracles. No matter how the Hautian Oracles punish him, he must accept it obediently. Otherwise, he is despising and rebelling against the Azura God Emperor, which is equivalent to rebellion. That is definitely a dead end, ha. The Golden Dragon Region Master murmured to himself. The haze in his heart was swept away, and he became energetic again. He did not waste any more time and quickly sent a message to Jing Feihong to agree to the proposal and discuss the specific details. Soon, the two of them sent a message to the Hautian Oracles in the Sanchuan region to report the situation and ask for his help. Chapter 3387. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed. Yank, Chao Qingyu, Lan, and the rest recuperated in the divine ship for 10 days. Their injuries and divine power had all recovered. As for Ji Tianqing, he had already been in seclusion for 500 days in the distorted space-time. During this period, he first refined divine King Qiulian's divine spark fragment and greatly increased his strength. He also obtained dozens of divine Dao laws. Next, he went into seclusion to cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art. He had been comprehending and cultivating the third level of the cultivation method. After breaking through to the divine king realm, the second level of the heaven-punishing divine art was perfected. He could only explore and comprehend the third level of the cultivation method to quickly increase his strength. Fortunately, after thousands of attempts and deductions, he successfully comprehended the third level of the cultivation method. Although he had been in seclusion for half a year, he had only just entered the third level of the cultivation method. Even so, it allowed his strength to increase significantly. When he ended his seclusion, his strength had already reached the peak of the first level of the Divine King realm. He was just one step away from breaking through to the second level of the Divine King realm. However, every level of the Divine King realm was extremely difficult to break through. It was 10 times more difficult than the Divine Lord realm. This was not something that could be solved by seclusion. It required the corresponding opportunity. In addition, the number of divine Dao laws that Ji Tianqing had grasped successfully reached as many as 380. Compared to before he went into seclusion, his combat strength doubled again. Moreover, the Bloody Flame Sacred Tree only took 5 days to successfully transform into a king-level sacred tree. After breaking through to king level, the Bloody Flame Sacred Tree underwent a huge change. Not only did the sacred tree grow to 15,000 feet, but the area covered by billions of branches and leaves also reached a radius of 3,000 miles. At least 20% of the branches grew purple leaves. There were also many branches that bore purple divine fruits. The divine fire surrounding the sacred tree was even more turbulent. The aura it emitted was also more vigorous. The benefits to everyone were even greater. Yin Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Long, Wu Shuang, Zhen Hong, and the rest, the effects of their seclusion cultivation under the sacred tree had also doubled. As a result, Yin Yao and Ji Ku reached the 9th level of the Divine Lord Realm one after another. White Dragon and Zhen Hong had also grown to become High Divine Lords. Even Black Dragon and Xian Yu had rapidly grown, their strength reaching around the 6th level of the Divine Lord Realm. Ji Tianqing was deeply gratified by everyone's rapid growth. His family and friends, as well as his many followers, had all become experts and experts. In this life, he would gradually build up his forces and restore the glory of the past. In fact, he would even make his forces even stronger than before. Only then would he be qualified to take revenge on the 5 god emperors. Shua. With a flash of divine light, Ji Tianxing left the Nine Heavens Ten Extremes pagoda and returned to the reef. He looked at the divine pagoda lying quietly on the reef and then observed the reef island. He couldn't help but frown. For 10 whole days, no one has come to this reef island, and no one has discovered the existence of the divine tower. This shouldn't be the case. Even if this place is very remote and doesn't have any mines or gems, there should be many divine lords searching for king-level divine objects in this area. Ji Tianxing vaguely felt that something was wrong. These 10 days had been too peaceful, but he couldn't figure out why, so he called out to Chao Qingyu and Yank in the divine battleship. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan had long ended their seclusion and were meditating. After hearing Ji Tianxing's call, Yank and Chao Qingyu left the divine battleship and appeared in front of him. Lan remained in the divine battleship's secret chamber and continued to cultivate. In the past, she had always felt that after breaking through to the divine king realm, she would reach the peak of the divine path and be able to accompany Chao Qingyu to travel the world until they grew old. However, the encounters in the past few months made her realize that breaking through to the divine king realm was only the starting point to reach the peak of the divine path. If she wanted to live safely and resolve all the dangers she encountered, her strength was far from enough. Therefore, she had to work even harder to cultivate and increase her strength. Ji Tianxing sized up Yank and Chao Qingyu. Seeing that their injuries had healed, he said, "Since you've recovered, I have nothing to worry about. Let's go. We'll continue searching for king-level divine objects." Previously, we sensed the aura of a king-level divine object on a reef island. We were about to investigate, but were stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor and the others. In the blink of an eye, we've been delayed for 10 days. I hope that the group of divine lords who arrived first haven't found the divine object. If everyone competed and searched fairly, Ji Tianxing wouldn't be afraid no matter how many opponents there were. But now, they were 10 days later than the dozens of divine lords. The difference was too great. He was very worried that the divine lords had already found the divine object. Yank waved his fist and said fiercely, "As long as those guys haven't left the abyss, even if they have found the divine object, I can take it back." Ji Tianxing smiled and didn't say anything. He led Yank and Chao Qingyu and flew into the depths of the lava sea. About an hour later, the three of them flew for 200,000 miles and arrived at a purple-brown reef island. The reef island had a radius of 100 miles, and the height above the surface of the lava sea was about 1,000 feet. Previously, Ji Tianxing had detected the aura of the king-level divine object on this reef island. At that time, there were traces of divine lord activity on this reef island, as well as mineral veins and many gems. But now, when Ji Tianxing and the other two landed on the reef island, they found that the situation had changed. Not only were there many cracks and pits on the reef island, but the colorful mineral veins and gems were also gone. There was even a ravine that was 1,000 feet long and several hundred feet deep in the middle of the reef island. Everyone knew at a glance that an intense battle had taken place on this reef island. However, they searched the entire reef island but couldn't find a single divine lord expert. There wasn't even a single divine emperor's corpse. There were only some scattered sabers, swords, and armor fragments. Ji Tianxing searched carefully and found that the aura of the king-level divine object had also disappeared. Such a situation made him frown. Yank asked tentatively, "Young master, could it be that the group of divine lords found the king-level divine object here and caused a fight? After an intense battle, someone took the king-level divine object and escaped from this reef island?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "It's possible." Therefore, those divine lords left the reef island to pursue the person who took the divine object. However, this is just a guess. Let's look at another reef island. As he spoke, Ji Tianxing pointed to the southwest. If they flew in that direction for 80,000 miles, they would arrive at a reef island with a larger area. However, that reef island was the last island in this area. If they continued to travel for tens of thousands of miles, they would reach the end of the lava sea. It was blocked by endless rock strata. That was their last hope. Swoosh! Swoosh. Therefore, Ji Tianqing led Yank and Chao Qing Yu across the lava sea at lightning speed and rushed to the reef island.